He did not sit and give him a lecture, but rather he said, خُذُوا عَنِّي مَنَاسِكَكُمْ. Take from me your manasik. And he went from Al-Madinah alayhi salatu wassalam to the journey of Hajj, and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum watching and learning. And this is how we get to know how to make Hajj. The same thing with the Salah. صَلُّوا كَمَا رَأَيْتُمُونِي أُصَلِّي. Pray the same way that you saw me praying. So, but that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved this deen. So we have very specific rules and pillars and conditions and recommended acts and so on. So we'll talk about that inshallah ta'ala briefly before Maghrib. And then after Maghrib, the second session inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about from the very beginning of the journey what to do on a daily basis till the end inshallah ta'ala. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from each and every one of us. So we go straight to it, inshallah ta'ala. The first thing is, what is the definition of Hajj? Hajj is an Arabic word, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it in the Quran, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حَجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. So it refers to the meaning of al-qasd, when you aim to something. And of course, the religious definition of it is قصد البيت, or قصد الكعبة, to aim to go to the Kaaba, to the house of Allah, the first house of worship, للنسك, for the ibadah, replying to the call from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we know that this is the hukm of it, or the ruling of Hajj, as the second point here is that this is one of the pillars of Islam, and it's an obligation once in lifetime. And each point, as you see, there are so many evidences. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala perfected this deen. If we go extensively to all of the different evidences, the adillah in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, we need a month to go through it. But again, this will be very brief, inshallah ta'ala. The hukm, what's the hukm of Hajj? What's the ruling of Hajj? It's wajibun fil umri marra. It's an obligation once in lifetime. And the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is very clear in this, when he said, Ya ayyuhan nas, Inna Allah kataba alaykum al-hajj fahujju. Allah ordained Hajj upon you, so make Hajj. So a man, he said, O Prophet of Allah, afi kulli amin ya Rasul Allah? Is it every year, O Messenger of Allah? The Prophet ﷺ did not reply. The man asked again, and the Prophet ﷺ, he said, دعوني ما تركتكم. Leave what I left for you. Because if I said نعم, لما استطعت. If I said yes, it's an obligation every year, you won't be able to do so. إذا أمرتكم بشيء فأتوا منه ما استطعتم. If I command you to do something, do of it the best of your ability. وإذا نهيتكم عن أمر فاجتنبوه. If I forbid you from something, then stay away from it. So this is also as the ayah, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ لِمَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. And again, as you see here, the PowerPoint presentation is not in details, just the titles, and then you guys have to, I guess, if you want to take notes, inshallah ta'ala, it will be benefiting, inshallah. So what's the hukm of Hajj? It's a pillar of Islam. It's an obligation once in lifetime. And with the Hajj, and I'm not going to get into some differences of opinions, Umrah also is wajib. Umrah is an obligation also once in lifetime. And that's why if someone is going for Hajj, and we'll talk about the different types of nusuk, the best, even some of the ulama, they say that it's obligatory, is to make Hajj tamattu, where a person makes Umrah and then Hajj. But we'll get to that inshallah ta'ala. So this is the hukm of al-Hajj. One point with the hukm of al-Hajj which is important. If someone has the means this year to go for Hajj, and the means used to be az-zad wal-rahila, the provisions, and the provisions for a person to go to Hajj and come back, and the provisions for his family, and al-rahila, the mount, the transportation that would get him to go for Hajj. But now you can add to it the logistics of it, Hajj visas and things like this. So you might have all the means, but you don't get the visa. So that means you're not able to make it for Hajj. So if someone has the means to go for Hajj and intentionally they delay it, is it a sinful act or not? That's the differences of opinions among the ulama. And I take the opinion that, which is the opinion of Imam Ahmad and others, that this is haram for someone to delay Hajj when they have the means to go. So again, but the other opinion is a valid one, right? So once a person has the means, then a person should take the means to go for Hajj, and this is also have the details to it. Then after that, there are 6 conditions for the obligations, for the obligation of Hajj. Conditions for every ibadah. This is something that we need to understand briefly. Every ibadah, we have to have conditions for it. Wudu is a condition for the salah. Can you just start the salah without its conditions? Of course not. You have to make wudu, you have to face the qibla. All of these are conditions. So there are 6 conditions for Hajj, and these conditions of Hajj, there are 5, and the 6th one is specifically for women. So as the conditions of every ibadah, which is al-Islam, to be a Muslim, of course. So a person has to be a Muslim first before they can go for Hajj, even though Hajj is an obligation upon everyone. But for everyone to be a Muslim and then to go for Hajj. Al-Aql, to have sanity, not someone that is insane. Al-Bulugh, for someone that reached the age of puberty. If a child, and this is the next point, if a child makes Hajj, the Hajj is valid, the child gets the reward for it, and the parents or the guardians of the child, they get rewards for it, but it doesn't take away the obligation, Hajjatul Islam, from the child. Once he reaches the age of puberty, then he is mukhatab, he is addressed with Hajj to make it as an obligation upon himself. Not to say I did it when I was a child, but it's valid from him and he get rewards, and the parents also, or the guardians, they get reward. So al-bulugh is a condition of obligation. A person has to be in the state of puberty. As the ulama, they say, to be a free person, not being enslaved, for example. And the 5th one is al-istita'a, the ability, the physical ability, the financial abilities, and whatever becomes, as we said, in one's lifetime. So the al-istita'a, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِمَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا, for those who have the means to go for Hajj. And when the ulama, they talk also extensively into the subject of al-istita'a, the capability, like the provisions, for example. It is not just for you to go there, you have to also have the means to return back. You have to have something to leave for your family to return back, and things like this. The 6th condition, which is specifically for women, and that is for her to have a mahram to travel to Hajj. Because of the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, ليه الحديث لا تسافر امرأة تؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر مسيرة يوم وليلة إلا مع ذي محرم. It is not permissible for a believing woman, she believes in Allah and the last day, that she travels a distance of a day and night without a mahram. So if a woman, she has the means to go for Hajj, but there's no mahram to go with her, that means she's not able to go for Hajj. She's not sinful. There's no burden on her whatsoever. And the matter should be, she should be at ease with it, right? Till Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for her to go, and ideally people will go with their husband or with their son or whatever means that she can go for Hajj. And this is where, again, we talked about the child's Hajj and the subject of Hajjul Badal. These are all introductions before we get into the subject. Hajjul Badal is the Hajj when someone makes Hajj on someone else's behalf. So is this permissible? Yes, for those who passed away and they did not make Hajj, with some details to it, or someone that is alive but there is no way for them to make it for Hajj. Very old in age, they're not able to make it for the journey of Hajj. Someone else can do it on their behalf. Not that someone is sick this year or so, someone that no way according to the physical means that they would make it for Hajj. So someone else can do it on their behalf. And there are conditions for that. One of the basic ones is the one that makes the Hajj al-Badal, Hajj on someone's behalf, he has to have made Hajj for himself first. It is not permissible to make Hajj on someone's behalf unless you had made Hajj for yourself first. So this is with these things briefly. These terminologies, it's important to know them one after the other, inshallah ta'ala. And then again, everything will be put together, inshallah ta'ala. The first one is the mawaqit of Hajj. Even though maybe the types of Hajj should be mentioned first, but this will be mentioned later, inshallah. I don't want you to think now or in a way that now you're leaving home and now I'm going to Hajj, but I'm supposed to do first and second and so on. Just bear with me, be patient with these things to get to understand it, and then we'll talk about that, inshallah ta'ala, in the order that it should be. The word mawaqit from al-miqat, these are the specific places where the Prophet ﷺ specifically made it very clear that whoever comes to Hajj or Umrah, they cannot pass these specific mawaqit, whether it's the miqat itself. This is a physical place around Mecca, varied in distance. No one can pass by it or adjacent to it, so you can draw a line between all of these places. You cannot cross these mawaqit or what adjacent to it unless you are in state of ihram, and we'll talk about al-ihram. So these are the mawaqit of Hajj, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ, as he said, miqat ahlul Medina, for example, is the al-Aqiq, which is Abyar Ali as it's known now, where it's right outside of al-Medina. So if someone is traveling from al-Medina to Mecca, then once they get it to the miqat of al-Medina, it's right outside of al-Medina. It's the furthest miqat to Mecca. So where the Prophet ﷺ, he made Hajj and his Umrah from al-Medina. So it's right outside of al-Medina, 9 kilometers outside of al-Medina. So that means the person, his journey in state of al-Ihram is the longest from Medina to Mecca. All the mawaqit are closer to Mecca. So what is the significance of the mawaqit? The Prophet ﷺ, when he stated clearly, وَقَّتَ لِأَهْلِ الْمَدِينَةِ ذَا الْحُلَيْفَةِ وَلِأَهْلِ الشَّامِ الْجُحْفَةِ. The people from the people of Sham, Palestine, Syria, and so on, and anyone that is coming that way. So the same thing with the people coming from Egypt, from Turkey, from America. This is their miqat. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Al-Juhfa, وَلِأَهْلِ Najd, the people coming from Najd, from Riyadh and Iraq and so on, Qarn al-Manazil, وَأَهْلِ Yemen, Yalamlam. So all of these places, if you see it, I didn't have it on the map, you can see it clearly. These are specific spots. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, هن لهن ولمن أتى عليهن من غيرهن ممن أراد الحج والعمرة. So whoever lives there, then their ihram is from there. Whoever lives closer to Mecca from these mawaqit, they don't have to go outside. They can just make their ihram from their place. So those who are living in Mecca, for example, they can make their ihram from Mecca. If they're making the ihram for Hajj, for Umrah, they have to go outside of Mecca. But these are the mawaqit for those who are coming from away beyond it. They cannot cross it unless they are in state of al-ihram. That's why if you go with a plane or so, they will say there's 15 minutes, 20 minutes till the miqat, there's 5 minutes till the miqat, and it is not permissible to pass the miqat unless you are in state of al-ihram. So what is then al-ihram? So again, the mawaqit are physical places where you cannot cross them unless you are in state of al-ihram, and we'll talk about what happens if someone passes them and they forgot, they were asleep, they did not make their ihram or whatever. So al-ihram is a state. Usually the word al-ihram, people refer to it as the pieces or the clothing that they wear. Right? Al-ihram comes from haram. That means certain things will be forbidden on you while you are in that state of al-ihram. And of course, every move, there's a wisdom behind it. And there is great wisdoms behind these things, one of which is ta'zeem al-Bayt al-Haram, to exalt the house of Allah, the first house of worship. That no one is to come to Mecca unless they are in that state of al-ihram. And we can talk a lot about this. And every action that we do, especially for Hajj, Hajj is a journey, there is no like of it whatsoever. And that's why if you fulfill all the pillars of Islam, Hajj is a complete different experience, if it's correct to say. Because it really perfects one's religion. Makes you see the essence of the deen of Islam. And it's all about submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, humbling oneself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are a abd to Allah. You are a slave of Allah. And that's why everything is left behind. A person leaves his home, his comfort, his wealth, his family, and even the clothes that he liked to wear, everybody's wearing the same thing. And then it goes from one stage to the other. So, and this is something else, and this is something that we should actually go through the things that should be in our hearts in every stage of Hajj. But we'll do that inshallah ta'ala maybe in another session. But this is as important as what we're discussing, the physical aspects of it. It's very important for us to be, our hearts should be acting, because there are many different things that can distract us from this. So al-ihram is the state of getting oneself into the nusuk. So what is the definition of al-ihram? Al-ihlal bil-hajj wal-umrah is when you get yourself into the state of hajj or umrah. And it's basically by saying, labbaik Allahumma, your intention is in your heart, and then you are by the miqat, or right before it, and you cannot go after the miqat without saying labbaik Allahumma umrah or labbaik Allahumma hajj. It depends on what you're going for, and we'll talk about the types of nusuk. So for example, hajj tamattu', which is most of everybody would do, they would go first with umrah. So they would say labbaik Allahumma umrah. You say it with your tongue, but your intention is in your heart. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ did. So now you are in state of al-ihram. You are in state of al-ihram just by saying that, even if you're not wearing the clothes of al-ihram, yes. So to make sure that we remember that the state of al-ihram is once your intention and you said that you are now in the nusuk, in the rituals of either hajj or umrah. But of course you cannot do that with your normal clothing, because you have to forbid certain things on you that are normally permissible. And this is where we talk about the mahdhurat, or the prohibitions during ihram, right? So the reason why I said it like this is that if someone comes into the miqat and he's wearing pants and shirts and whatever, and he says labbaik Allahumma umrah, and he makes his umrah, and he finishes the umrah, is the umrah valid? As far as validity is concerned, yes. If he's intentionally doing that, he's sinful. But if he has an excuse in missing one of the prohibitions or whatever, or he forgot, right? There are ways to, there is kaffarat, there is kaffara, there is expiation to it. Intentionally, of course, no one would do that intentionally. But if someone forgot, either they go back to the miqat and they say labbaik Allahumma umrah, and they put their clothes of al-ihram on, and they forbid what's supposed to be forbidden, and there's no harm on them. If they're not able to go back, then they do the kaffar. We'll talk about the kaffara later, inshallah ta'ala. Then the details of al-ihram before we get into the prohibitions, and that's part of the sunnah, and this is what we also will repeat briefly when it comes to what we do first and then second and so on. The sunnah is that the person would take a shower to clean oneself, to take what needs to be taken away from the body, like sunan al-fitra, and to put tib or perfume on, as the Prophet ﷺ did, and Aisha radiallahu anha, she put that on the head of the Prophet ﷺ when he was making ihram. And that, with the practicality of things, we'll talk about it inshallah in the airports and things of that nature. And then for men, their ihram is to wear two sheets, lower sheet and the upper sheet. This is the izar and the rida, and it's recommended for both to be white, as the Prophet ﷺ did. And the prohibited actions, as we will get to know inshallah ta'ala. So the main thing for men is not to wear al-makhit. And the word al-makhit, it does not mean threads. It means not to wear anything sewed to fit on one's body. So that's why this is the two sheets, the upper sheet and the lower sheet. No pants, no shirts, no anything that would fit on the body. Even when people wear the lower sheet like a skirt with elastic bands, this is not permissible. It has to be something that is loose, that you wrap it around yourself, and it's easy. And also maybe we can practice that inshallah ta'ala. So to stay away from anything that sewed on the body. This is what is meant by al-makhit. But if the clothing itself of al-ihram is sewed at the end, sometimes people see the threads are falling, like they intentionally do not sew it. You mean to like this for example. You make sure that it's not, the threads are not falling apart like that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay. What's meant by al-makhit is something that fits the body, something that is sewed on the body, and with some details. When it comes to women, their ihram is in two places only. For women, ihram is on their face and their palm. These are the two places of ihram for women when it comes to the clothing. That means the Prophet ﷺ forbade women from wearing al-quffazayn, gloves, and from wearing a niqab, right? And a niqab is a specific covering of the face because it fits the face. So the women in Hajj or Umrah, they're not forbidden from covering their face, they're forbidden from wearing the niqab. So the niqab is a specific one, it's like the burqa, is the one that fits. But if she covers her head from something on top of her head, there's no harm. And that's what Aisha radiallahu anha and Salama radiallahu anhuna, they said. They were with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and they having their faces exposed. فَإِذَا مَرَّ بِنَا الرُّكْبَانِ, if men are passing by them, سَدَلَتْ إِحْدَانَا جِلْبَابَهَا مِنْ فَوْقِ رَأْسِهَا. One of us would bring her jilbab from the top of her head to cover her face. So they would still cover their face in front of the men, and even if that jilbab touches the face, it's okay. It doesn't have to be away from the face. It can cover can touch the face. But what's forbidden is like the same thing as the makhit, something that would fit the face. So if it comes from the top, then there's no problem. The second thing is they don't wear the gloves. So if she covers her hand underneath her khimar, that's fine, but not to wear gloves. There's no specific color for women. There's no specific clothing, the normal clothing that they wear. There's no special clothing, only the face and the hands. So this is with regards to the ihram. And then when we talk about the 10 prohibitions, and there's the talbiyah and things of that nature, but if we count the mahdhurat, or what's forbidden once a person is in state of al-ihram till he's relieved, or till they are relieved from the state of al-ihram. If we count these things, and again this is just theoretical things that we need to observe to make sure that we understand them when you don't and we know them. If you want to write them down, inshallah ta'ala, very briefly, each one has an evidence, and there's a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So the first one is for a man to wear al-makhit. So al-makhit is clothes that are sewed, fits the organs of the person. So qamis, shirt, pants, gloves, imama, covering the head, all of these types of things. But the things that are permissible to wear, watch for example, or a ring, or if a person is wearing a belt to keep his money, all of these things are permissible. And when it comes to the foot, what a person wears on in their foot, it's not permissible to wear al-khuffayn. And al-khuff is like the shoes, something that is fit the entire foot from the heels, which is how shoes are. That's why people would wear slippers. And does the face of the foot has to show or not? It doesn't have to show. So as long as there's nothing around the heels, as long as you just slip your foot in, then this is what is sufficient. And even if a person in situations where it's not feasible, but if someone doesn't find anything, they can wear their shoes, as the Prophet ﷺ even said. You don't have to cut it from the back, but don't get yourself into that. Just having a slipper, and a person would wear a slipper, this is sufficient. So the first thing that is forbidden is al-makhit for men. The second one is, we'll count 10 inshallah ta'ala briefly. Covering the head of the man. Covering the head with a head cover. But having an umbrella or being in a car and things like this, of course, this is okay, there's no harm. And this is clearly stated, even if someone dies in Hajj or in state of al-ihram, the Prophet ﷺ, when a Sahabi died during Hajj, he commanded the people for his kafan not to cover his head, because he yub'ath yawm al-qiyamati mulabbiyan. He will be resurrected in the day of judgment making talbiyah. So he is to be buried as if he is in the state of al-ihram without covering his head. So the second thing is not to cover the head. Number 3 is covering the face of the woman with a niqab or the burqa. And again, we talked about that. So this is number 3. Number 4 is, I want to make them with the orders that I have here, is to use any tib or itr or any good smell or perfume, whether it's oil or other than oil, anything that makes, that people put on their body to smell good. This is not permissible. This is prohibited in the state of al-ihram. And it's very obvious when it comes to the tib. It's from the sunnah, from the recommended acts before you make ihram, is that you put perfume on. So you put deodorant, you put perfume on, but on the parts of the body that the ihram is not going to be on it. So the head, the face, the hands, but not on the clothing of al-ihram itself. So that's why the clothing of al-ihram is not to be, with bukhur or scent to be exposed to it or to put perfume on it. This is not permissible. But on the body, before you put your ihram on, it's from the sunnah to have, good smell on. But then once a person in the state of al-ihram, this is not permissible till the umrah is finished or till the ihram is finished. Sometimes there's details. Can you wash your mouth with toothpaste? The answer is, as the ulama, they say yes, because this is not it's not a perfume. You're not doing that to smell good in front of people. This is, cleaning your mouth. If you want to use the siwak, mashallah, that's the sunnah. Can you use soap with a nice smell? It's better to avoid it. But does it break the ihram? Some says yes, because it has a good smell and the smell stays with you. So it's better to avoid it. And others, they said you don't use the soap so that you smell good in front of people. It's just a way to wash your hands. But again, it's better to be away from the differences of opinions, to stay away from these types of soap. So this is at-tib. Number 4, at-tib or perfume and the like of this. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, وَلَا ثَوْبًا مَسَّهُ الزَّعْفَرَانِ. Do not wear clothing that has been touched with الزَّعْفَرَانِ al-waras, something that smells good. Number 5, to remove the hair from the body. It's prohibited to cut one's hair, to shave one's hair. Of course, shaving the beard is haram in Hajj and before Hajj and after Hajj. Cutting the nails. So all of that is recommended before you make Hajj. When a person takes a shower, he cuts his nails, shave the pubic hair and underarm hair and things like this. But once a person in the state of al-ihram, it's not permissible to take any hair intentionally. Anything, take this as a rule. If something happens by mistake or forgetfulness, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, رُفِعَ عَنْ أُمَّتِ الْخَطَأُ وَالنِّسْيَانِ. My ummah is not going to be responsible for the mistakes or forgetfulness. Sometimes a person is like this with his beard and he's thinking, so he does this and then he finds a hair or two in his hand. It does not require a kafar. As the ulama, they say, Wallahu a'lam. So removing any hair, this is not permissible, as the Prophet, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَحْلِقُوا رُؤُوسَكُمْ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْهَدْيُ مَحِلَّهُ. And if someone has a condition, as it happened to some of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they had the lice, so the Prophet ﷺ told them to shave, but then they would do the kafar. So when these mahdhurat, when these things, the prohibited actions, if a person has an excuse, a valid excuse, they can do these things and no sins on them, but they have to do the expiation. But if someone doesn't have an excuse and he does these prohibited actions, then this is sinful. And he still have to do the expiation, right? So removing the hair, and this is for both men and women. Again, the only differences between men and women is the niqab and the gloves versus the entire body for the men. Number 6, which I mentioned it with removing the hair, but to be more specific, cutting the nails. This is also something that is consensus among the ulama, that this is not permissible unless a person has an excuse. You have a nail that is, hurting you. All of a sudden, maybe you hit something and the nail kind of needs to be removed. Remove it and there's no harm in that case, inshallah ta'ala. And to be safe, do the expiation, as we'll talk about the expiations, inshallah ta'ala. Number 7, which is maybe not practical nowadays, is to kill an animal to eat. Right? So a sayd. And that has details to it. When people would travel long distance and they see a deer passing by, they want to eat. And this was a huge fitna, a trial for them. Because once you're in the state of al-ihram, you cannot hunt any animals. You cannot even point to someone that is not in ihram. When they go for the trips of Hajj in the past, not all of them are in the state of al-ihram. People are just there to serve, for example. So they themselves, they can go hunt for them. They can go get animals for them. But if you're walking and you see a deer, hey, there's one over there, it's not permissible for a person in state of ihram, whether to do it himself or whether to guide or to aid someone. But if someone else is not in the state of al-ihram and they do that and they bring the food, then they can eat. So this is, and there's special expiation for a side which is mentioned in the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even tested the believers when they were with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, when they were going in ihram, the animals were very close to them. And this was a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Sahaba. Even the ayah says, تَنَالُهَ أَيْدِيكُمْ, that if someone extend his hand, he will catch the animal. Usually the animals, they run, right, and they're scared of human beings. But they were coming closer to them while they're in state of al-ihram with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. If someone would catch it, they will get the animal. And it shows the strength of their iman, hungry, traveling. And as some of the ulama nowadays, they say, you see how the many tests we have very close to us. So we have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. So this is with regards to as-sayd. This is number 7. And number 8 is to have the contract of marriage while in the state of al-ihram, or even intend to marriage with al-khitbah, is when you ask for marriage from someone or you make a marriage contract. All of that is forbidden in the state of al-ihram, when the person is in the state of al-ihram. So people are traveling, a mother, for example, would try to have her son engaged to someone. This is all not permissible whatsoever, of course, in the state of al-ihram. Number 9, the relations that would be between the husband and the wife, and anything that leads to it, touching and so on. So all of that is forbidden while the person in the state of al-ihram, and there are major consequences as a result of that. It can break the entire hajj of a person, with some details, inshallah ta'ala, we can talk about it. And this is clearly stated in the ayah, al-hajju ashhurun ma'lumat, faman farada fihinna al-hajj, fala rafatha wala fusuqa wala jidala fil hajj. No rafath. Al-rafath is the relations between a husband and wife. So this is with regards to the jima' and the details of that. Number 10, it's still from the mahdhurat, even though there is no expiation to it, but reviling one another, arguing, fighting, whatever, all these types of things, because it's clearly stated in the Quran, فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ. And subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's word's perfect, of course, and you would find all kinds of reasons in Hajj to argue. And that's why it's mentioned specifically, وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ. Do not argue in Hajj, because so many people in one place and everyone has their own opinion, and things are not going according to what they desire, and logistics and things of that nature. So people start to argue while they are in state of al-ihram, which is something that is forbidden, as stated specifically in the Quran. So these are 10 points that are the prohibitions during ihram. Is it clear? So again, can we count them quickly? So men wearing makhit, covering the head, covering the face of the woman and the gloves, having perfume on. Number 5, removing the hair from the body. Number 6, cutting the nails. Number 7, the hunt or the game animals. Number 8, marriage, contract and engagements. Number 9, the al-jima' or the relations between husband and wife, and anything that is prerequisite to this or comes before it. And number 10, reviling or arguing, and so on. If someone does any of these mahdhurat, as we said, if a person does it forgetfully, except the relations, would be dealt later, inshallah. But if someone, does not observe any of these prohibitions, or they do it, then there is a kafara, and the kafara is not an order, but is a choice. Either to feed 6 poor people from the poor people of Mecca, so it has to be in Mecca, and there practically you would find booths where you can give that and they can purchase food and give it to the poor, or you can buy 6 meals and you can give it to the poor there, or nisf sa' grains that are equal to 1.5 kilogram of any grains that you can give it to the poor. So whether it's meal to be fixed or grains to be given, or that a person fasts 3 days, fasting 3 days, whether it's there or afterwards, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be right in Hajj. And the third one is dam to sacrifice. That's the most expensive. But this is in that specific, in the issue of mahdurat al-ihram. If someone does something that is forbidden for a person in the state of al-ihram, as they say, the fidya here ala al-takhyir. That means you have a choice. Because there's other things where you have to do one thing. If not, if you're not able to, then you go to the next one, which is when a person doesn't do a wajib, for example, an obligation in Hajj. But mahduratul ihram, the things that are forbidden in the state of al-ihram, this is how to expiate for the sin if a person does any of these prohibitions. So then that leads us to the type of Hajj. The type of Hajj. And we'll just say them briefly, but most of the people, they do one, which is actually everybody's recommended to do that one part. But when a person is coming to al-miqat, either a person can make the intentions for Hajj alone, and that's called Hajj Ifrad or Mufrid, to be Mufrid, like one, making Hajj only, coming for Hajj and leaving, and that's it. Or to have the intention of making Hajj Qiran, which is Qiran, that means when you put two things together. Hajj Qiran, that means you're making Hajj and Umrah together in one nusuk, in one ihram, without breaking the ihram. And that means a person would say labbaik Allahumma Hajj wa Umrah, both Hajj wa Umrah, and the actions of Hajj and Umrah will be together and will be with one ihram only. And the third one, Hajj al-Tamattu'. Al-Tamattu', as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it in the Quran, فَمَن تَمَتَّعَ بِالْعُمْرَةِ الْحَجِّ. Whoever makes Umrah and then Hajj. So Tamattu' is that a person coming at the months of Hajj. The months of Hajj are Shawwal, which is right after Ramadan, Dhul Qa'dah, and Dhul Hijjah. So if a person comes to Mecca in Shawwal, or now in Dhul Qa'dah, or in Dhul Hijjah, to make Hajj Tamattu', that means to come to make Umrah. So to say Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. A person doesn't have to say Labbaik Allahumma Umrah to Hajj, like some people they say, no, just Umrah. So they make Umrah, and they've done with the Umrah, and they wear the normal clothing, everything is normal, back to their normal life. And then on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, from Mecca, they're staying in Mecca. In Mecca, they, from their hotel, from their place, they would make the ihram for Hajj. So they start again, they take a shower, clean themselves, and so on, and they put the clothing of ihram. And from Mecca, they don't have to go outside even of Mecca. They would say, Labbaik Allahumma Hajj. The 8th of Dhul Hijjah. They do that in the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, and then they go to Mina. Right? So this is Hajj Tamattu'. A person has a choice to do any of the three, yes. Which is the best? You would find even debates, even among the ulama. The Prophet ﷺ, what he did is Hajj Qiran. Why? Because he had his hadi, he had his sacrifice with him, traveling with him from Al-Madinah. And that's why whoever comes with his sacrifice, traveling with him, then the best nusuk for him is Qiran. Because that's what the Prophet ﷺ did. But no one takes that in the airplane or anything like that. So in that case, what's the best type of nusuk without going into the details is a tamattu'. Is a tamattu', and some had said even it's an obligation, but the correct opinion that it's the most recommended one. That is to go make Umrah and relieve yourself from al-ihram, and then on the 8th you make the ihram for Hajj. The masail of Hajj are so many, and the ease of the rules of the Sharia, mashallah, is perfect. So sometimes people, they reach Makkah late, and they, for example, and this has happened to the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, or women, they get their menses. So these are situations that can come. I would mention just an example to show that a woman comes with the intention of making Hajj Tamattu', right? So she comes by the miqat and she says what? Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. She's only making Umrah, correct? And right after that, before she reached Mecca, she got her monthly cycle, which is Salah is forbidden, Tawaf is forbidden. Everything else for the Hajj is permissible, except for the women when she has her cycle, except the Tawaf, and that's the only one. Of course, Salah, she doesn't have to make up the Salah, but you cannot make Hajj without Tawaf. Tawaf of Al-Hajj as a pillar of Al-Hajj. But for Umrah, also she cannot fulfill the Umrah unless she makes the Tawaf of Al-Umrah. So she has to wait till she's done with the 7 days or the 6 days or whatever, and then she will be still in the state of Al-Ihram. This is in other days of Hajj. If she does go in Ramadan or something like this, and she got her monthly cycle, she has to wait in the state of Al-Ihram till she's done, and then she makes the actions of Umrah. But here in Hajj, if she comes and she made Hajj Tamattu, and she said Labbaik Allahumma Umrah, and after that she got the monthly cycle, and there's only 2 days left for the 8th of the Hijjah, for example. So she won't be able to make Umrah and then take the Ihram off and then make another Ihram for Hajj. So in that case, and that happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, then in that case she changes the intention from Tamattu to Hajj Qiran. So she's in state of Ihram and she made Tamattu, she made Niyyah of Umrah only. But then she got her cycle. Then her intention will be that she would make the Hajj part of her Ihram. So that means she stay in the Ihram, does not make Tawaf, and in the 8th of the Hijjah she goes to Mina, and then after that, with the rituals of Hajj, and then she makes 1 Tawaf for the Hajj, and that means she made Hajj and Umrah together with 1 Ihram. But this is again something that we can talk about some of these exceptions. But it shows the 3 types of Hajj. So if you ask which one should I choose for myself, Tamattu, for sure, inshallah ta'ala. Right? If you have, the Hajj al-Mufrid, al-Ifrad, there's no sacrifice upon that person making Hajj Ifrad. It's valid. If a person wants to do that, that's fine. And there's no Hajj for that person. Qiran and Tamattu, they both have to make Hajj. They have to do the sacrifice. And the difference in actions, what is extra? The Tamattu will have 1 extra Tawaf and 1 extra Sa'i. So because you make Tawaf and Sa'i for Umrah and you're done. And then for Hajj you have Tawaf and Sa'i. Right? Separate. If you make in Hajj Qiran, you will make, if you come early, you will still make Tawaf al-Qudum, and then you have to make the Tawaf of al-Hajj. But you can make your Sa'i in the beginning between Safa and Marwa. You don't have to do it again. So you would find the difference in physical actions, maybe 1 Sa'i. Or if a person comes late, he goes straight, so it's 1 Tawaf and 1 Sa'i. And the Mufrid the same way. So it's not much of more actions. It's just the sacrifice that has to be done, and that's also something to be discovered. So it's Hajj al-Tamattu is that you go with Umrah and you finish the Umrah completely, and then you are not in state of Al-Ihram, and then on the 8th of the Hijjah you make the state of Al-Ihram. So these are the types of nusuk. Why the ulama, they say Tamattu is the best? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, even though he was doing Hajj Qiran and he took his animal with him, he says, if I didn't suqtul haddi, if I did not take the haddi with me, I would have made it Umrah. And he would say to the companions, those who did not have the haddi, to make it Umrah. They even went with Hajj only. They changed their intention to make it Umrah, and after that they finished with the Umrah and they make Hajj. So this is what the Prophet ﷺ would tell them to do. But again, the matter is easy, and a person, as far as the validity is concerned, all of them are okay. So this is with regards to the 3 types of Al-Hajj. The next point, now we talk about the pillars and the conditions or the obligations of Hajj. Briefly, inshallah ta'ala, plus we have to talk about some of these actions afterwards. When we say pillars of Hajj, there are 4 pillars of Hajj. And the meaning of a pillar is rukn. That means no way a person, his Hajj will be valid unless he has to do these pillars. There's no way out, basically. No expiations, no kafara, nothing. You have to make these 4 pillars of Hajj. The first one is, and this is where we need to be really focused on what each one is versus the obligations. The first one is Al-Ihram. A person has to be in the state of Al-Ihram. But what is meant by the Ihram as a pillar? Right? We're talking very specific fiqh matter here. As a pillar is the niyyah. We're not talking about clothings and things like this. Ihram meaning that you say Labbaik Allahumma Hajjah, or Labbaik Allahumma Umrah as a pillar of Umrah. If a person doesn't say that, he's not in state of Al-Ihram. So there's no way a person can make Hajj without Ihram. Right? You have to be in state of Ihram. If someone, again, he woke up and find himself in Mecca, he did not make Ihram by the miqat. Then, if he's not able to go out, what does he do? He says, Labbaik Allahumma. For the Umrah, he can go to outside of Mecca. But this case, he came from outside, or Hajj. He say, Labbaik Allahumma Umrah from whatever he is in, and he expiate with the fasting 3 days and so on. But he has to say Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. This is what Al-Ihram is to say Labbaik Allahumma Umrah or Labbaik Allahumma Hajj. Recently someone asked, and this is a repeated matter, especially with people forgetting to make the Ihram, or they forgot to take their clothing of Ihram. I've seen that more than one time. A person in the plane and he lost his Ihram. That means he's going to cross the miqat without putting the Ihram clothing on. So what that person should do, some people, they would just, well, there's nothing for him to do, so they don't say Labbaik Allahumma Umrah, which is wrong, of course, right? If that happens, that person, when he passes by the miqat and he's wearing clothing, he doesn't have clothing of Al-Ihram, say Labbaik Allahumma Umrah, you're doing that pillar. You're not missing the pillar. You are now in state of Al-Ihram. So everything that is forbidden for you, you forbid it. The only thing is that the clothing, you're not able to do it. So once you're able to do it, you do it, and then you do the expiation. But if he doesn't say Labbaik Allahumma Umrah, then he goes to the other expiation, which is dam, and has to be dam. If he finds himself going to Mecca and there's no way for him to go out to the miqat, it's not about the prohibitions of Ihram anymore. Why? Because he did not say Labbaik Allahumma Umrah or Labbaik Allahumma Hajj. He has to do them, he has to sacrifice. So then when we say the pillar of Hajj is Al-Ihram, is the niyyah. Is the niyyah that he is getting himself into the nusuk, into the ritual of Hajj or Umrah. The second pillar is Al-Wuquf bi-Arafah. To be in Arafah as a pillar of Hajj. And this is where it gets sometimes confusing, remember last year, but it's easy to understand, inshallah. From the perspective of a pillar, what is meant by Al-Wuquf bi-Arafah, you know that Arafah is in what day? The 9th of the Hajj. We'll talk about that separately, inshallah. To be in Arafah on the 9th of the Hajj, the Arafah time starts from after Zawal, after Dhuhr, all the way to Maghrib, and then once the sun sets, people leave Arafah and they go to Muzdalifah. And this is what normally everybody does. But Al-Wuquf bi-Arafah as a pillar is from the time of Zawal on the 9th of the Hijjah, which is the time of Dhuhr. It goes all the way to the Fajr of the 10th. What does that mean? It means if someone was late and missed Arafah, for whatever reason there is, and Maghrib time came on the 9th of the Hijjah, did he miss his Hajj? Not yet. He still can go to Arafah during the night and stay there for 5 minutes, 1 minute, whatever there is, and he goes to Muzdalifah. He made it for Hajj. As long as he goes to Arafah before Fajr of the 10th. Nobody optionally would do this, right? Everybody will go to Arafah at Dhuhr time. But this is what we say, but as a pillar. We have to be precise with the words pillar. Because pillar meaning that you missed Hajj, you cannot make it up. If the Fajr of the 10th of the Hijjah comes and someone did not come to Arafah whatsoever, his Hajj is over, he cannot make it up. There's no way to, even no expiations, nothing works, because he missed Arafah. This is if the Fajr of the 10th comes. And we'll talk about the wajib when it comes to Arafah, which is different than the pillar. So as a pillar of Hajj, Al-Wuquf bi-Arafah, and that starts from the Dhuhr time in the 9th of the Hijjah, it goes all the way to the Fajr of the 10th of the Hijjah, even for 1 minute. Number 3 is Tawaf al-Ifadah. The Tawaf of Al-Hajj, or they call it Tawaf al-Ziyarah. This is a pillar of Al-Hajj. And there's a specific time that, you cannot do it before that specific time. Tawaf of Al-Hajj as a pillar. You cannot make Hajj unless you make that Tawaf. When does it start? It starts from the middle of the night of the 10th of the Hijjah. So, which is after Arafah. Arafat is the 9th. And then the night comes, which is the night of the day after. So it can a person do the Tawaf of Al-Hajj on the 9th of the Hijjah? No. It does not count. Does he do it after Maghrib? It does not count. It counts from in the middle of the night. If he does it after the middle of the night, then it counts. It's not the most perfect time, but this is for women. For those who are weak, they can do it from then. And it's perfectly to be done on the 10th. Is there an end limit to it? No, as long as it's done. And the person will continue to be in the state of al-ihram till they do the tawaf of al-hajj or tawaf al-ifad. So if they didn't do it on the 10th, they can do it on the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, but they are still in state of ihram till they make the tawaf of al-hajj. This is as a pillar. And number 4 is the sa'i, or the between al-Safa wal Marwa, to make it as a separate pillar, to make sa'i between al-Safa wal Marwa, and the sa'i is always after tawaf. You cannot make sa'i before the tawaf. Tawaf around the Kaaba and then the sa'i between the Safa and the Marwa. So these are the 4 pillars of Hajj. As far as the pillar is concerned, we're not talking yet about what to do, what and next and things like this. So these are the 4 pillars of Hajj. It's important to write them down, to remember them as pillars. Al-Ihram, which is the niyyah, and the Wuquf bi Arafah, and you make sure that it's, when it's mentioned as a pillar, from the Dhuhr of the day of Arafah till the Fajr of the 10th of the Hijjah, which is the Eid day. And number 3 is the Tawaf, which starts from the middle of the night after the 9th of the Hijjah. And you have the Sa'i between the Safa and the Marwa. If we can get to the obligations before Maghrib, I'm not sure if we can do it, but it's 7 obligations. And obligations mean wajibat. And wajib is different than the pillar, different in the way that we deal with it if a person misses it. And that's why they put it into under the meaning of wajibat. Wajibat means if a person misses it intentionally, that's haram. Forgetfully, there's a reason, excuse, whatever, then the Hajj is not over. Different than the pillar. That means there's ways or expiations or to make it up. But still the Hajj would count. But never to be missed, of course. And these are 7 obligations, 7 wajibat of al-Hajj. If we count them one after the other, inshallah ta'ala, and then we'll get to understand them when we go through one step after the other. If someone misses any of these wajibat, then upon him is dam. They have to do a sacrifice to be done in Mecca for the poor people of Mecca. Even if a person remembered 10 years after Hajj that he missed a wajib, then he need to have someone to slaughter an animal for him in Mecca and to be given to the poor. So the first of the 7 is al-ihram from the miqat. You see the difference now? To make ihram from the miqat is wajib. We said as a pillar, al-ihram what? Al-ihram is a pillar. But as a wajib, as an obligation, is to make it from the miqat. So if someone doesn't make the ihram from the miqat, he made it when he was in Jeddah, that means he passed the miqat, he did not do a wajib. But if he says it in Jeddah, labbaik Allahumma umrah, his umrah is valid. Labbaik Allahumma hajjah, his hajj is valid. But he has to expiate for the fact that he didn't make the ihram from the miqat. Did not make ihram, did not say labbaik Allahumma. Not that he broke some of the ihram rulings. You understand the difference? So as a wajib, to make the ihram from the miqat. If he goes back to the miqat, mashallah, there's no harm on him. So al-ihram from the miqat, from the mawaqit that the Prophet ﷺ specifically mentioned. The second one, again, this is also might be confusing to some when it comes to Arafah. As a wajib of Arafah is to stay in Arafah till Maghrib if you entered Arafah any time before that. So if you entered Arafah, Arafah is a valley. If you entered Arafah after Dhuhr, which is what the Arafah time starts, it is not permissible for you to leave Arafah till sun sets. If a person leaves intentionally, then this is sinful and he has to expiate. And if he forgetfully or whatever, that means there's no sins, but he has to expiate. But then we said as a pillar, if you go at night, that's if you missed being in Arafah. You understand? But if you entered Arafah, you cannot leave. And you should not choose not to enter Arafah because you have to enter Arafah. This is the first one in the pillar if a person has an excuse. But if a person entered Arafah from after Dhuhr, then it is not permissible to leave till sun sets. Sun has to set completely before a person can leave the boundaries of Arafah. And you stay away from anyone that would tell you otherwise. This is a wajib of Hajj. So let's go, things like this. People can sit in the buses, no problem. They can wait, yes, but they cannot leave the boundaries of Arafah till sunset as a wajib of Arafah. And we're not talking about the rewards of Arafah and things. This is something else. This is as the wajibat. Number 3, to spend the night after Arafah in Muzdalifah at least till the middle of the night. So this is number 3. After people left from Arafah, they go to Muzdalifah. So Muzdalifah, and every time I wanted to get a map, but I forget, but alhamdulillah. So if you look at me, inshallah, you have Makkah is here, right? If you can imagine, Mina is there, right? And then you have Muzdalifah attached to Mina, and Arafah is a little bit further away, right? So when people go to the 8th in Mina, and then they go to Muzdalifah, I'm sorry, they go to Arafah. So they skip Muzdalifah. They go from Mina to Arafah. We'll talk about the sequence of things. But then after they finish Arafah, they go to Muzdalifah, which is right before Mina, and to spend the night in Muzdalifah. To spend the night in Muzdalifah. So Al-Mabit, to spend the night in Muzdalifah, or at least half of the night in Muzdalifah, is wajib. To spend at least half of the night in Muzdalifah, this is wajib. And the Prophet ﷺ gave the rukhsah, the excuse for women and children and elder ones to leave after the middle of the night, to make it for the tawaf before the crowd comes. So if someone, women can go, those who accompany the women, old people, things like this. But as long as they stay at least to the middle of the night. So spending at least half of the night in Muzdalifah is a wajib, right? And this is the number 3. Number 4 is to stay in Mina the nights of Ayyam al-Tashriq. We didn't talk about this yet, but this is a wajib. To stay in Mina the nights of Ayyam al-Tashriq, which is, Ayyam al-Tashriq is the 11th, the 12th at least, and if a person stays to the 13th. So to spend at least more than half of the night in Mina in these days of Ayyam al-Tashriq. And this is where the Prophet ﷺ stayed. We're just listing them, and then after Maghrib we'll talk about them and how to do them. Number 5 is to make the Rami al-Jamarat, to throw the Jamarat. And the Jamarat, as we'll talk about it inshallah ta'ala, in the 10th. It starts from the middle of the night of after Arafah, which is the next day is the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. So you have only Jamrat Al-Aqaba on the 10th. There are 3 Jamarat. When you're coming from Muzdalifah or from Arafah to Mina, so the first one, Jamra that you would face is, they call it Al-Jamra Sughra, the small one. Then the middle one, then Jamratul Aqaba, or the Kubra, which is closer to Mecca. So in the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, you only throw the last one, the closest to Mecca, and we'll talk about that and how to be done. Then the 11th and the 12th, at least, of Dhul Hijjah, you have to do the 3 of them. 7, 7, 7. Every day, 7, 7, 7, and then the 12th, the same thing. And if people leave, make ta'ajjul, that's fine. If they stay to the 13th, they make the 3 Jamarat. And this is wajib. If a person misses it, he has the dam upon the person to do. So this is the Jamarat. We'll talk about the details of that inshallah. Number 6 as a wajib is al-halq or al-taqsir, to shave the head or to shorten the head. This is as a wajib of Hajj. After finishing the Hajj, or on the 10th, there are actions to be done. We'll talk about them inshallah. Every day there are things to be observed. So shaving the head or shortening the head, and shaving is more recommended of course, this is a wajib. So that means if someone forgot or he could not or whatever, then there's them that he has to observe. Number 7 for Hajj, Tawaf al-Wada'. The farewell Tawaf is wajib. And that's the last thing that a person would do in Mecca before he leaves. So if he stays for a few weeks, and then before he leaves, he still has that as an obligation. It's recommended in Umrah, but it's wajib in Hajj. And if a person doesn't do it, then he has to give them. And there's always the common question is, if a person leaving right after Hajj and they didn't make the Tawaf of Al-Hajj, they can combine them together with one Tawaf? Yes. But as long as the last thing before a person leaves Mecca, it has to be the tawaf. And to one's best ability, of course. So if they say if you need to be ready 8 hours before we tell you, then you be before then, 5 hours before that you make your tawaf, that's fine. So this is tawaf al-wada. So these are 7 obligations of Hajj that we need to make, like a checklist. You have to make these things, and then we'll talk about how these things are done. So again, the 7 obligations are to make ihram from the miqat, to stand in Arafah till Maghrib if a person enters Arafah during the day, to spend the night of the Laylatul Nahr in Muzdalifah, at least half of the night, and number 4, to spend the night in Mina in the days of At-Tashriq, or most of the night. Number 5 is the Jamarat, the 10th one, Jamra only, Jamrat al-Aqaba, and the rest of the days, the 3 Jamarat. Number 6, shaving or shortening the hair. Number 7 is the farewell tawaf, tawaf al-wada. Then after that, inshallah ta'ala, after Maghrib, the way we'll do it, inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about the tawaf, and we'll talk about the sa'i, and we'll talk about the jamarat as separate actions. Now you're in tawaf. How do you make tawaf briefly? You're in sa'i. How to make sa'i? How to make the jamarat? And then after that, we'll talk briefly of the, what do you call it, the time, when you do, every day what do you do? Exactly with what things to be done from the very beginning to the end. And that will be, inshallah ta'ala, after Maghrib, inshallah. What is it? The slaughter for the, yes, it's not from the wajibat of al-Hajj, but this is from when it comes to, for those who are making tamattu' and those who are making qiran, yes. And if they don't have the means to make slaughtering, it's not the expiation for them is dam. In that case, they have to fast 10 days, 3 in Mecca and 7 when they go back, if they don't have the means financially. We have to do it in yes, it has to be done in Mecca. All the sacrifices done in Hajj and Umrah, it has to be in Mecca. Whether it's the Hajj for the Tamattu or Qiran, or Jubran for the dam as a result of expiation, all of that has to be in Mecca. And feeding the poor has to be all in Mecca. Is that then? Is it time or not yet? Well, inshallah, we'll continue after Salat. We'll have time, inshallah ta'ala, for questions. Inshallah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Muhammad wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala ashrafil mursaleen. Nabiyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. After talking about the pillars and the obligations of Hajj, and we said the differences between the pillars and obligations is that the pillars, a person has to make the pillars. There's no expiation for it. And the obligations, if a person misses it intentionally, of course this is haram and he has to expiate for it. If it's missed unintentionally or with an excuse, then there is expiations, which is the dam in this case. Then if we talk about tawaf as an act of worship, as mentioned before, we'll talk about tawaf inshallah ta'ala and sa'i and the jamarat. And then after that, we'll talk about how to make the Hajj in general, inshallah. When it comes to the tawaf, and there are certain conditions to be fulfilled for the tawaf. And the tawaf, as we know, is to go around the Kaaba 7 times. And this is to be done for Umrah as a pillar of Umrah. It's a pillar of Hajj, of course, and it can be a recommended tawaf at any time the person makes tawaf. So this is a unique act of worship that it's not permissible to be done in any place on the face of earth except in the Kaaba, around the Kaaba. And this is the only way for a person to make that particular ibadah. So when people, al-'adhu billah, they make tawaf around the qubur, for example, or the graves, and these are all acts of shirk. So tawaf is ibadah, and there's no other spot on the face of earth that it's permissible for someone to make tawaf around except the Kaaba. So as any condition for any ibadah, if we want to write them down, again, I'm not the best in making these types of slides. It was very quick, just the major points. But these conditions are, just to make sure that we count 6 inshallah ta'ala. The first one as the condition for any ibadah is the niyyah, the intentions. Because if someone, it happened that he's just want to make a morning walk, for example, after Fajr, and he find himself walking with the people, one round around the Kaaba, he says, okay, let me finish another 6. It doesn't count. You have to have the intention that you're doing tawaf, like intention of ibadah or any salah. And the Prophet ﷺ clearly stated that الطواف is salah, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أحل الله عز وجل لنا فيها المنطق. That means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted for us to talk while making tawaf. In salah you cannot talk, but in tawaf it's not like it's recommended to talk, but if someone speaks in tawaf, it doesn't break the tawaf. Like the salah, it doesn't break the tawaf. But it's salah, if it's a state of salah, if a person is making the tawaf. Another condition is, the second one, is to cover the awrah, the same way that a person would cover his awrah for the salah. So this is a very obvious one. They say the number 3 one, which is also for the salah, is the tahara, to be in state of wudu. For tawaf, a person has to be in state of wudu. If a person breaks his wudu, he has to, as exactly in salah, he has to leave the salah, make wudu and come back and start over from the beginning of the salah. So the same thing applies for the tawaf. That if a person during the tawaf breaks his wudu, he has to go and make wudu and then come back and start over. In some rare occasions, where some of the fatwa of the ulama, if it's the tawaf of al-Hajj and it's very crowded and it takes 2 hours or so to make tawaf, and someone broke his wudu and they go make wudu, they have to go make wudu. And they come back, they add to what they've started. But this is a fatwa in very specific situations. But the norm is that a person would go make wudu and start over again. So because the tawaf is salah, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said. So this is a tahara. And that's why for women, again in their monthly cycle, everything in Hajj is permissible for them as far as the actions of Hajj. We're not talking about salah. Everything is permissible for them to do in Hajj except tawaf. Except the tawaf. So, for example, if she made the tawaf and she was in state of tahara, then after she finished the tawaf, the monthly cycle came. She can make the sa'i between the Safa and Marwa. Only the tawaf is not permissible for the woman in her menses, and that's why she has to wait till she's done and then she can make the tawaf. So, at-tahara is a condition. A fourth condition is that the 7 rounds has to be finished. There's no such a thing as making tawaf 3 rounds and then you quit, even if it's a recommended tawaf. It's like can someone prays 2 rak'ah but then nafl salah, but then after 1 rak'ah and a half he feels like he wants to leave. It's not permissible for you to leave. You don't say this is recommended salah, I can leave anytime I want. No, it's haram for you to leave, to break your salah unintentional like this without any reason. So the same thing with the tawaf. Even if a person is going to make tawaf as a recommended tawaf, you have to finish the 7 rounds. And and it starts from Al-Hajar Al-Aswad. See if I have a, okay, here's the Kaaba, right? You see where's the Hajar Al-Aswad? I don't think I can point with a pen, but you see that Hajar Al-Aswad is that silver place. This is Al-Hajar Al-Aswad, the black stone. The tawaf starts from there. The tawaf starts from Al-Hajar Al-Aswad and it ends by the Hajar Al-Aswad. It starts there and it ends there. No matter how far a person or close to the Kaaba, you have to start by Al-Hajar Al-Aswad. So if you enter the Kaaba or the Mecca or the Masjid Al-Haram in any place, right, you don't start your tawaf till you walk with the people, but you're not in state of tawaf. Till you reach Al-Hajar Al-Aswad. Then once you buy the Hajar Al-Aswad, then you start your tawaf, and we'll talk about the sunan, but one of which is that you would point your right hand if you're far away from it and you say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. Then you start your tawaf. And you do the same thing for every round when you come to Al-Hajar Al-Aswad. But we're first talking about the obligations. So it starts from Al-Hajar Al-Aswad and it ends by Al-Hajar Al-Aswad. And you see that on the side where the Hijr Ismail, which is here. I guess can use the pen. Okay, here we go. Bear with me, inshallah. So it has to be around like this, right? So this Hajj Ismail, even though this picture, I guess it was during the COVID. So this part here, this is part of the Kaaba. You know, Hajj Ismail, people go pray inside. This is part of the Kaaba. This is all Kaaba. And there's a history behind this. And this is how it was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when the people of Quraysh, when they were rebuilding the Kaaba, they were short on means to build it, so they built it this way. So then this part was left. And then it was actually the Kaaba was rebuilt again, and then it was when they wanted to build it again, and the Imam, they said, we don't want to play with this matter so that people would think that anytime a ruler come, he can change the building of the Kaaba. So they kept it that way like this. So, and it should be kept like this. So the tawaf is around from here. If a person goes inside, that breaks the tawaf. So it starts from Al-Hajj Al-Aswad, and one round is all the way to the end. We didn't talk about what's recommended yet. So this is as far as an obligation. Another obligation, which is number 6, is the same way when you do in the salah and wudu, al-muwala. Muwala, that means the continuity of it. So when you do the 7 rounds, you do it in a continuous way. You don't make 3, then you go have dinner, come back, finish the 4. There's no such a thing. But some things doesn't break the continuity of the tawaf. Salah, Salatul Fard. So they made the adhan, and you don't have to wait till the iqamah of the salah. You're making tawaf, and the adhan of Salatul Asr is called. Right? And people start to slow down, and they stop, and they make sunnah and things like this. You don't have to keep on continuing till the fard, the iqamah is made, because it might be very difficult for people. If you stop there, even that's before the iqamah, that's fine. You stop in whatever point you stop. You make your sunnah, that's fine. You wait for the iqamah, and they make the iqamah. You pray Salatul Asr, for example, and then after you finish, you can finish even the dhikr, but nobody would make tawaf, would allow you to that. You have to stand right away. So then you continue from the spot where you stopped. You continue there. You don't have to start from the very beginning of the round. You continue from where you stopped because of the salah. So the salah doesn't break the continuity of it. Salatul Janazah doesn't break the continuity of it. So if they call for Salatul Janazah, you stop and you make Salatul Janazah, and you don't have to start from the beginning of the round. The same thing if a person felt tired, you know, and he stopped or rested for some time because he's tired, that's fine, and he continue or she continue right after that from the same spot that they stopped without having to repeat a round or so. But this is a condition, the continuity to be around the Kaaba. And since this is mentioned, then so these are the 6 basically things that is an obligations. So as we said, the niyyah, covering the awrah, the tahara, the purification, to finish the 7 rounds from the black stone till you reach the black stone, and the continuity to make the 7 rounds, and to make the tawaf around the entire Kaaba, and to have the continuity of it. When it comes to the recommended acts, you know, when you first come to any tawaf, as we said, you start with Al-Hajar Al-Aswad, and the ideal situation is that you make istilam of it. You kiss Al-Hajar Al-Aswad, the black stone, if you're able to. If you can't, then you touch it. Then if you can, then from a distance you point with your hand and you say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. You can even touch it with a stick if you have a stick. So you say Allahu Akbar every round. Say Bismillah as usually you would say Bismillah in anywhere. In the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith of Ibn Umar, and we have time inshallah to mention some of these hadith. He said, رَأَيْتُ النَّبِيَّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم يَسْتَلِمُ. I saw the Prophet ﷺ يَسْتَلِم الْحَجَّ الْأَسْوَدِ. That means he touched the Hajar al-Aswad وَيُقَبِّلُ. So touch it and kissing Al-Hajar al-Aswad. So a man said to Abdullah ibn Umar, أَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ غُلِبْتُ عَلَيْهِ أَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ زُحِمْتُ. What do I do if I'm overpowered, it's so crowded, I'm not able to? So Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, he said, اجعل أرأيت باليمن. Leave أرأيت in Yemen. Leave what if in Yemen. The man was from Yemen. So he kept on saying, what if? What if? He said, leave it in Yemen. I'm telling you, this is what I saw the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So, and that's why if a person is not able to do so, then is to, from a distance, to say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. And where is when a person passes by it. There's a green light by the wall that shows you the end of the tawaf. But you don't have to even guide yourself with the green light. You won't miss the green light, but you don't have to. And it used to, even before, alhamdulillah, that they removed it, they used to have a line right there on the ground from the Hajj al-Aswad like this, brown, as to mark the beginning of the tawaf. And this used to make everybody stop at the line, because this is a line, and then they move. So alhamdulillah, they removed it, because the matter is easy. And you don't have, it's not by the line where you are, just once from a distance you see it, and you feel like you're right there by the Hajj. So you say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, and you keep on going. And it's, the last round, you don't say Allahu Akbar. When you do the 7 ones, then the last one, once you get by Al-Hajj Al-Aswad, you just finish and you leave. You don't say Allahu Akbar. You do it later. And if you don't do it later, as we will talk about it, inshallah ta'ala. So when it comes to the recommended acts, in this case, you make tawaf, you can read Quran, you can make dhikr, you can make dua. There's no specific adhkar, as always need to be mentioned, where people have to say this in the first round, to say this in the second round. All of that is not from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And actually people make it difficult for themselves, and they make it difficult for others. Because people think that this is part of the tawaf, and they have to make sure that they say this and they say that. All kinds of things that is not according to the sunnah, and it's bid'ah, even innovations in the deen, where people also do the collective act of adhkar or dua and screaming and yelling and things like this. This is all not from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Each person on their own. If a person doesn't know anything, recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't have to raise your hands with the dua. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for matters of goodness in this life and in the hereafter. Tasbih, tahleel, reciting Quran, anything. And to be busy with the ibadah and not to use the phone or taking selfies and all of these types of things, but to be busy with the ibadah. Any dua during the tawaf, and then the last corner, which is this corner right here. This is a Rukn al-Yamani. I'm sorry, I'm making a... Okay, so here, when you go by every Rukn, like this is one corner, this is one corner, this is one corner, and this is another corner. So every corner points to something, right? So this corner right there, this corner points to Al-Yaman. That's why it's called a Rukn al-Yamani. Its direction is to the Yemen. The Prophet ﷺ, he used to yastalim al-Rukn al-Yamani. If he has the means, he would touch it ﷺ. Nothing to be said. He used to touch it ﷺ. But if from a distance, no touching and no pointing. So some people, they come to the Rukn al-Yamani right there, and if they are from a distance, they would point to it. No, there's no such a thing. It's only if you're right there, you touch it. And there's nothing to be said. If you're from a distance, you just go on. And the only dhikr that is recommended, where the Prophet ﷺ would say between al-Rukn al-Yamani, this Rukn, and the Hajj al-Aswad, meaning in the last corner of the Kaaba, is رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. To repeat it while you are in the last fourth of the corner of the Kaaba. Other than that, it's just general dua. And this is where the hadith of Abdullah ibn Sa'ib, he said, I heard the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam يقول ما بين الركنين. He would say between the two rukn, between the two corners, ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. So after finishing the 7, again, nothing else specific mentioned. After finishing the seven rounds, then is to, from the recommended acts, is to pray the 2 rak'ah behind Maqam Ibrahim. As you see in this picture, it shows the tip of it. This is Maqam Ibrahim right there. This tip of it, right there. This is Maqam Ibrahim, which is where Ibrahim alayhi salam, he stood to build the Kaaba, and it used to be attached to the Kaaba, of course, but they removed it back at the time of Umar radiallahu anhu. So, and this is clearly stated in the Quran, to make 2 rak'ah, وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. Make the Maqam Ibrahim as a place to make salah behind it. And the Prophet ﷺ, as the hadith of Ibn Umar, that the Prophet ﷺ came فطاف بالبيت سبعة. He made 7 rounds around the Kaaba. وصلى خلف المقام, and he prayed behind the maqam 2 rak'ah. And he made the tawaf between the Safa and Marwa. And he says, وَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. You have in the Prophet ﷺ the best example. Ideally to be done behind al-maqam. Doesn't have to be right behind it. Any place behind it, even if it's far. If a person is not able to, and people should follow, of course, the instructions, any place in the haram is fine. 2 rak'ah, recommended 2 rak'ah to be prayed. But what's for sure something not to be done is to stand on the way when people are making tawaf. And this is a rule, this is a principle in matter of the tawaf that can be carried in many other occasions or many other things. If there is a place where the only place for people to make tawaf is there, then tawaf is a priority before anything else. If someone stand there and make his salah? No, he has no rights. If people walk in front of that person, no sutra for him, no sutra for him, because the tawaf comes first. Because where else can make tawaf? But he can make the salah any other place. So that's why a person should stay away. And if you're making tawaf and you find yourself you're going to cut someone's salah, there's no sutra for such a person. He needs to be back where he can make his salah. So this is where the 2 rak'ah. And what's recommended after making the 7 rounds. And then, as we said, the last one, you don't say Bismillah Allahu Akbar, you don't say Allahu Akbar. You go pray the 2 rak'ah. And then the Prophet ﷺ would drink from Zamzam. حتى يتضلع منها, till his ribs are big. That means he drinks as much as he can. عليه الصلاة والسلام. He said ماء زمزم لما شرب له. Zamzam is whatever you drink it for. You make dua or with your intention. You're drinking Zamzam for shifa, for cure, for you to memorize the Quran, for you to enter Jannah, whatever intentions, and you make dua. And then after drinking Zamzam, the Prophet ﷺ would come back, and at least he would go to the Hajj al-Aswad and yastalimu. Right? Since he did not do it in the last one, he would do this after the 2 rak'ah, and after drinking Zamzam, he would come back and touch al-Hajj al-Aswad, and he leaves. Of course, when it's crowded, you're not able to do that. So after you finish the 2 rak'ah and drinking Zamzam, you can point to the Hajj al-Aswad and you say Allahu Akbar, and then you leave. And if it's not done, it's fine. You still finished with the tawaf. So this is clear. This is how the Prophet ﷺ did it. This is then after that to go to As-Safa wal Marwa if it's Hajj or Umrah, because As-Safa wal Marwa is only to be done if it's Umrah or Hajj. There's no recommended sa'i between As-Safa wal Marwa. You have to be in state of nusuk. You have to be in state of ihram, or you're making Hajj. And As-Safa wal Marwa, as we know, is which is now in the haram. Let me see here what I have here. Now, so it's in the haram, but it's supposed to be outside the haram. So religiously, As-Safa al-Marwa is not within the Masjid al-Haram. So that's why, again, for women, for example, when they do the sa'i, they're religiously outside of the haram if they make the sa'i between the Safa and the Marwa. And the Safa and Marwa, as we know, the 2 mounts where Hajar alayhi salam, she went between them 7 times. So as far as to be done in Hajj or Umrah is to start with the Safa and to end with the Marwa. This is one. And there is adhkar to be said, and to make sure, inshallah ta'ala, the adhkar to be said according to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And a person going to the Safa and facing the Kaaba, when he reaches by the Safa, he looks at the Kaaba if it's feasible, and raise one's hand and to say the ayah in the beginning, in the Safa wal Marwa min sha'airillah, the ayah, and then to make a specific dua and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after this dhikr. And the Prophet ﷺ would make a long dua and then repeat the dhikr again, and then to make the dua and then to repeat the dhikr again 3 times. And this is, you can get this from anywhere, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that when he first went to As-Safa, while he was going on top of the Safa, he says, Inna Safa wal Marwa min sha'airillah, the ayah. He says, Abda'u bima bada'a bihi Allah. I start with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started with, that he mentioned As-Safa first. And then once he saw the house, the Kaaba, he faced the Qibla and he says, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika. First he says Allahu Akbar, And then he said, لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير لا إله إلا الله وحده أنجز وعده ونصر عبده وهزم الأحزاب وحده ثم دعا. Then he makes dua. And then after the dua, he repeats the dhikr again. Then dua again. Then repeat the dhikr again, and then dua again, and then he leaves. And he goes to the Marwa. And this is definitely an essential thing for a person to have, like Hisn al-Muslim, the Muslims that did, or something like this, where the authentic adhkar from the Prophet ﷺ to be said. 7 rounds, the same thing with the tawaf around the Kaaba, but the 7 rounds from As-Safa to Al-Marwa, it counts as 1. And from the Marwa to the Safa, 2. So you start from As-Safa, you end the last round by Al-Marwa. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the Prophet ﷺ would walk, but between where the green light is, which is the lowest part of the wadi, the lowest part of the valley, where Hajar, she ran in this area, he would run ﷺ with short, not with short distance, actually we missed something in that, in the tawaf we didn't mention, but for the Safa to go as fast as a person can, only for men, not for women, and there's no specific dhikr to be said. And that's as the hadith, ثم نزل المروة حتى إذا انصبت قدماه رمل في بطن الوادي. So he would run عليه الصلاة والسلام. For women, they walk. And of course, if someone with his wife, he should not leave her and go. So this is where the sa'i between the Safa and the Marwa, and there's mentioned here some conditions there and some recommended acts. But the conditions is, as we heard, you start from a Safa, because if a person starts with the Marwa, it doesn't count. Sometimes you find yourself by the Marwa after the Tawaf. So you have to walk all the way to the Safa, and that doesn't count. You have to start from a Safa, and you have to make sure that you go the entire distance between a Safa and Marwa. This is the second one. And the continuity also is something that is a must. If a person stops to rest, that's fine. But not to leave and come back after a few hours to continue. Can you have time between a tawaf and a sa'i? Yes. If you make tawaf, you can rest and come back and make sa'i, no problem. You don't have to do it right after the tawaf. But within the sa'i, when you're doing it, you're supposed to have that continuity while doing it. And some of the recommended acts, as we heard. So this is where the sunan, and the sunan, as we said, is to run and to make the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to face the Kaaba, both in the Safa and in the Marwa. So every time you make the dua to the best of one's ability. This is a Safa and Marwa, right? Again, a tawaf is at any time. What we missed in the tawaf, if you are in ihram, if you're wearing the clothing of al-ihram, not because it happened that you're wearing the clothing of al-ihram, that means you are doing either umrah or tawaf al-qudum when you first go to Mecca. Your 3 rounds in the beginning of the tawaf, there is a ramal in it, where the Prophet ﷺ, he did it and he said to the companions to do it, and that is to run with muqarabat al-khuta, that means with short steps in the first rounds, if there is space, of course. And al-idtiba' is to show the right shoulder, in the entire tawaf. So al-ramal, to go to run in the first 3 rounds for men only, the first 3 rounds only, if there is space. Al-idtiba', which is to show the right shoulder, is in the entire 7 rounds. Not before and not after. So those who have, they show their right shoulder before the tawaf, this is not from the sunnah. And after making the 7 rounds, before making the 2 rak'ah, is to cover the 2 shoulders, not to pray with the shoulder being exposed. So this is with the tawaf and the sa'i. The jamarat, which is to be done on the 10th and the 11th and the 12th, and for those who stay in Mina more, they stay for the 13th. This is the jamarat. Let me see if I still have the picture there. Maybe I don't. Here you go. Okay. This is, I just got it now from the internet, with the pictures. It's not the real pictures, of course, of the jamarat. As you see here, this is al-jamra, the first one, al-jamra al-sughra. the smaller one. It's not size-wise a small one, but they call it the small one. They're both, all of them, they have the same size, but they call it the small one. So with this drawing here, you can see, just to look at the small one, meaning the first one, when you're coming from Mina, the bigger one is the closest to Mecca. And let me, here is, if you see here, this is Mecca. You see Mecca right there. Here is Al-Masjid Al-Haram. And if you see where's Mina, this white part is all Mina. This right there is Mina. Right? These are the tents of Mina. And the Jamarat is right there. These are the Jamarat. This is Jamrat Al-Aqaba, this one. This is the big one. And this is the middle one. And this is the small one. Right? You see them? So, for the Jamarat, this is when it's going to happen. Let's first look here. This is Mecca. This is Mina. Muzdalifah is right there. This is Muzdalifah. Okay? This is Muzdalifah, where only one night is to be spent. This whole area is Muzdalifah. And Arafah is right there. This is Masjid Namir. Where the Prophet ﷺ, he was in Arafah in Masjid Namira, which is now the Masjid, he prayed there. And in Masjid Namira, part of it is in Arafah and part of it is outside of Arafah. And there are marks to mark the valley of Arafah, right? So again, so when we look at this here from a bigger picture, I hope that it's clear. So here is Mecca, and this will, when we talk about when the 8th and things like this, but let's first say the Jamarat. But briefly, you are in Mecca, you make your Ihram on the 8th, after you make the Tamattu', and then you go to Mina. You go to Mina, whatever place you're going to be in Mina, you stay in Mina the 8th. And then the 9th, you go to Arafah. You pass by Muzdalifah. And then after the Maghrib of Arafah, you come to Muzdalifah, you back here to Muzdalifah to spend the night in this area. As you see, there's no tents here, because people spend the night here in the openness of Muzdalifah. And then after you finish with Muzdalifah, then you go back to, you go to the Jamrah. So on the 10th, you'll come to Jamrat Al-Aqaba, which is this one. And of course, it's covered, so that, as you see here, there's levels, right? There's the bottom level, top, many levels, 3 levels or so. So you throw only Jamrat Al-Aqaba, the last one, which is the closest to Mecca. When we say the closest to Mecca means what? Here is Mecca. So which one is closer to Mecca? This is Jamrat Al-Aqaba, right? So on the 10th, you throw Jamrat Al-Aqaba only. The 11th, you have to do the small, then the middle, then the big one. You're coming already from Mina, so the first one that you come to is the small one, then the middle one, then the Aqaba. If we go back to this drawing here, this is the perfect way to do it, and it doesn't have to be this way. This is how the Prophet ﷺ, he made the Rami of a Jamrah. I'm not able to mark with the pen, but if you see the small one, the Prophet ﷺ coming to the small one, he would throw the Jamrah from any place. But after he threw the Jamrah 7, it's best to throw it to make Mecca on your left side. So if you're going this way, you're facing the Jamrah and Mecca is on your left side, right? This way. After he would make the 7 pebbles, and this is the 11th, right? The 11th day of the Hajj. He would say, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, and he throw it. And you have to throw it like this. You cannot throw it like this. You cannot throw it like this if you're right there. It has to be like that. And you wait till you're very close, and you throw it like that. And then the Prophet ﷺ, after throwing the Jamarat, and the Jamarat, as the Prophet ﷺ, in the Maju'il al-Tawaf wal-Jimar, and the Sa'i, all of that for what? For the dhikr of Allah. It's not stoning shaitan or anything like this. It's for the dhikr of Allah. Yes, at the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was going after the shaitan. But this becomes part of the rituals of Hajj as dhikr. As mentioned before, when you say, now when we're sitting here saying Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, it's great, mashallah. But you go all the way to be in that spot, on that time, to say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, it's the greatest thing. So this is what is meant to be there. It's to put the effort to make the dhikr there, this exactly the same way. So throwing the jamrah, and then the Prophet ﷺ, you see that second person, he would go to all the way to the right. To the right of the jamarat. Of course, it's crowded, people will push you away and things like this. If you can, you go all the way to the right and face Mecca. They're all facing Mecca this way. Face Mecca and make dua. Right? So, and it's a long dua. The Prophet ﷺ would make a long dua. And from the same spot, from the same direction, you go straight to the middle one. So you see the guy where he's throwing the jamrah from where? From that side. Right? From you did the small one from the left side. If you're going this way to the jamrah, from the left side, and then you do a zigzag. You go all the way to the right and you make dua. Then you go from the same direction to the middle one. You throw it from that where you're coming from. Then you go all the way after the jamrah to the left on the other side. So you come here as that one before last, would make dua facing Mecca as long as a person can. Then to go from the same direction till Jamrat al-Jamra al-Kubra. As they say, al-Kubra, which is the last one closer to Mecca, your Mecca is on your left side while you're throwing the Jamra, if you can. But if you do it in any place, there is no harm. So if we go here again, so when you're going, again, you're throwing here, and then you go to the other side, and then you go this way, and then you go the other side. So when you're throwing the Jamra, as you see, this is Mecca, and you see the tower, of course, now it becomes very clear. So you would face Mecca while you're making the dua. Okay, so this is where the Jamra is, the Jamarat. And again, it doesn't have to be done this way. And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he would make takbir, everyone with 7 Jamarat. Do you have to take the hasa or the pebbles from Muzdalifah? You don't have to. But the pebbles have to be picked up from anything within the haram. You cannot pick them up from Arafah. Arafah is outside of the haram. So if someone wants to make Umrah, for example, they don't have to go to Masjid Aisha. If they go to Arafah, that's fine because they're outside of Al-Haram. Muzdalifah is within the haram. So whether it's Muzdalifah, whether it's in Mina, whether it's on the way. But the Prophet ﷺ, when he was in Muzdalifah, he said to Abdullah ibn Abbas, pick the pebbles for me. And he said, when he showed them the pebbles, he said, yes, like this, hasal khadf, where they used to put them in between their fingers and throw it like this. Like the pea, like a small pea, but not big. And the Prophet ﷺ said, إِيَّاكُمُ الْغُلُوُّ. Don't be aware, be warned against extremism. Do not get the big ones. And this is where the famous hadith of the al-ghulu or extremism. In Mina, as you see, this is Masjid Al-Khif. You see that Masjid Al-Khif? See the minara here? Right? This is Masjid Al-Khif, where the Prophet ﷺ stayed in Mina. Where he said, ﷺ, 70 prophets of Allah, they prayed there. And Musa ﷺ, he came to Mina and he prayed as the Prophet ﷺ said. But again, we don't want to make this as a historical thing, just to get an idea so that we have the Jamarat. When it comes to the Jamarat, a person should do it himself. It starts from Jamratul Aqaba, from the middle of the night of after Arafat. The 11th and the 12th, it starts from Zawal time. So if you are in the 11th, you should not throw the Jamrah before Dhuhr time. You should throw it from Zawal time. The ideal is that the Prophet ﷺ will go to the Jamrah before Dhuhr, and he would stand there and wait for the Zawal. Once the sun goes this way, that means this is the beginning time of Dhuhr, he would throw ﷺ the Jamarat, the small one, then the middle one, then the major one, and then he would go back to the tent. When they say 24 hours and they put schedule for people, if you're forced, that's fine, but do not throw the Jamrah before Dhuhr. In the 11th and the 12th, it does not count. You can go later, but don't do it early. So if you don't do it at Dhuhr time, you can do it after Asr. You can do it at night if you're not able to, but don't do it before its time. Because the Prophet ﷺ would make sure that he stand there and wait, and he would not do it before Dhuhr whatsoever. And this is for the 11th and for the 12th. If a person is not able to throw the Jamarat whatsoever, he can have someone else to do it on their behalf. But before we get to that choice, a person can make up the Jamarat in the last day. So he can go the last day and do all of them with one trip only. That means the small one, 7, 7, 7. if he's in the third day, or 7, and then the next one. This is if a person is not able to. He was extremely sick or someone extremely old. That's better than having someone else to do it on one's behalf on every day. But of course, inshallah ta'ala, the matter is easy when it comes to this. Right, so this is also briefly the jamarat and the dua. When it comes to, and then after, inshallah, if you have any questions, briefly the days of Hajj. You arrive, whenever time you arrive, you make Umrah. Right? You make Umrah first, if you're making Hajj Tamattu', and the pillars of Umrah is nothing but Al-Ihram wa Tawaf wa Sa'i. There's no Arafah, of course, in Umrah. And you have to shave or shorten, and if you're making the Umrah before Hajj, then shortening is better, so that you can leave the shaving for Hajj. And you make the Ihram from the Miqat. You finish the Umrah, you relieve yourself from the Ihram, you enjoy yourself being in Mecca, whatever, till the 8th of the Hajj. Once the 8th of the Hajj comes, and you are in Mecca, any place, in your place in the morning, whatever, of course, when they'll take you and things like this, you say, Labbaik Allahumma Hajj. After taking the shower and doing what you did before with Al-Ihram, you say, Labbaik Allahumma Hajj, and you become in the state of Al-Ihram. And you go to Mina. You go to Mina here in the 8th of the Hajj. And you stay in Mina, and this is now the 8th of the Hajj. The Prophet ﷺ, I'm saying the Prophet ﷺ prayed in Mina on the 8th of the Hajj, Salatul Dhuhr, and Al-Asr, and Al-Maghrib, and Al-Isha, and Fajr. So the 8th, he prayed these prayers, but he made Qasr. Al-Dhuhr, he prayed it 2 rak'ah in the time of Dhuhr. Al-Asr, 2 rak'ah in the time of Asr. Maghrib, 3 rak'ah. Isha, 2 rak'ah at the time of Isha. He did not combine the salah, but he prayed it each salah in its time, but 2 rak'ah only. With adhan and iqamah, each group in their tents and things like this. You don't have to gather everybody in one place. And this is how things are in Hajj. And the qasr here, when you're making qasr, is not because you're a traveler. Meaning the people of Mecca, they also make qasr. So this is qasr nusuk. This is qasr Hajj. Hajj qasr, not traveling qasr of the salah. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ did that without jam'. And therefore there's no sunnah prayer in the 8th of the Hajj. No sunnah dhuhr prayed, no sunnah of al-Maghrib, no sunnah of al-Isha. But he ﷺ, if we pray the witr, the night prayer, yes, he would not leave the witr and the night prayer usually, and especially the witr. And Salatul Fajr he prayed there, and Sunnatul Fajr is to be prayed. Prophet ﷺ never missed Sunnatul Fajr. But to leave the Sunnah on the 8th of the Hajj, this is something that the Prophet ﷺ did. If you want to pray, it's up to you, but it's to leave it, you get the rewards for it, inshallah ta'ala. And the 8th is called Yawm al-Tarwiyah, where the camels would drink and things like that, getting yourself ready for the journey to come. It's from the Sunan of Al-Hajj. It's not from Wajibat Al-Hajj. It's not an obligation. It's not a pillar. So if people, they skip it and they go straight to Arafah, that's fine. Their Hajj is valid. It's definitely stressed and recommended to go to Mina and to be in Mina and to rest in Mina on that 8th and to prepare oneself before the day of Arafah, which is the main day, the most important one in Hajj. And this is where the sins are forgiven and people are freed from the hellfire, and the closest that a person is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the shaitan, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, never seen more humiliated than he is seen in the day of Arafah. Why? Because of he sees how the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showers everyone, and they all get forgiven and the major sins are forgiven. This is the day where a person returns from Hajj, as the hadith كَيَوْمِ وَلَدَتْهُ أُمُّهُ, the same day as if his mother gave birth to him. So the importance of the day of Arafah requires for the person to prepare himself, not just physically, yes, to sleep and to take enough rest for the next day, but also to prepare one's heart for the day of Arafah. The day of Arafah, which is the 9th, after praying Salatul Fajr in Mina, the Prophet ﷺ prayed Fajr and made adhkar till after sunrise. Till after sunrise. If they say leave early and things like this, of course you cannot miss your group, so you have to leave. But I'm talking about how the Prophet ﷺ did it. He went to Arafah after sunrise, making talbiyah. And by the way, the talbiyah is once you are in ihram, labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, inna alhamda wa ni'mata laka wal mulk la sharika lak. Right? Anytime, especially if you move from one state to the other, it's more stressed. Meaning, you said at the miqat, you made the niyyah of al-umrah or hajj, labbaik Allahumma hajj. Then you start making talbiyah. You got tired, you stopped. You're moving from one place to the other, make talbiyah. The bus start moving, make talbiyah. Then maybe people will stop because they're tired. Every time you change your being of being walking or standing or riding, then to start again the talbiyah. So the Prophet ﷺ going to Arafah, making talbiyah and raising voice with the talbiyah and the virtue of it, of course. And then the Prophet ﷺ, when he went from Mina all the way to Arafah, and this is where Masjid Namira, this is the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ, he stayed there, and he did not enter Arafah till after the Zawal. So part of the masjid is in Arafah, and part of it is outside of Arafah. Right? So if the Qibla is this way, so the last part of the masjid is outside of Arafah. No, I'm sorry, the front part of the masjid. The Imam, when he's giving the khutbah in Arafah, he's outside of Arafah, in Namira. And the first half of the masjid or so, they're all outside of Arafah. Of course, when you are in Arafah, you go where they put you in your campgrounds or whatever. There's no need for you to go to Masjid Namira or Jabal al-Rahma and things like this. It's become waste of the time for a person, wasting his time not making dua and things like this. Plus, he can easily get lost. And any place in Arafah is valid. So that doesn't have to be there. And the Prophet ﷺ, as people think that he went to the top of the Mount of Al-Rahma, this is not true. But he stood there in the bottom of it, ﷺ. But he said all of Arafah is mawqif. All of Arafah is valid and it's equal in rewards, inshallah ta'ala. So the Prophet ﷺ, he did not enter Arafah till after he prayed Dhuhr and Asr outside of Arafah. So he prayed Dhuhr and Asr Jam' and Qasr. And then after that, and after he addressed the people and the khutbah and things like this, then he entered Arafah. If people entered Arafah in the morning, that's fine. But there's no events of Arafah. So you go to your tent, you sleep in the morning. If you get there early, you rest. The events of Arafah didn't start. Then at the time of Dhuhr, people to pray in their tents, the Dhuhr and Asr with one adhan and two iqamah, two rak'ah and two rak'ah. And then after that to start with the dhikr and the dua and the Quran all the way to Maghrib time. And this is again the main course and the most important day of Hajj. And of course the Prophet ﷺ, he said, أفضل ما قلت أنا والنبيون من قبلي. The best thing that I said, me and the prophets before me in the day of Arafah is لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير. So to say it as much as a person can, and of course the dua, and especially towards the end of the day, the matter becomes more intense when it comes to the dua. So this is the Arafah and what's in it in virtue and dua and things like this. Once Maghrib, the sun sets, the Prophet ﷺ left Arafah to Muzdalifah. He did not pray Maghrib in its time in Arafah. He combined Maghrib and Isha at the time of Isha in Muzdalifah. And as we said, as a wajib of Al-Hajj, if someone is inside of Arafah from any time after Dhuhr, it is not permissible to leave till the sunset. After sunset, going with ease to Muzdalifah. So if this is Arafah, then of course with the buses and things like this, then to go to Muzdalifah, which is here. It looks like it's close, but it's, maybe, I think it's maybe 15 or something kilometers, something like this. So to go to Muzdalifah in all of these places, even though the Prophet ﷺ, he was by the Mash'ar al-Haram, but he said all of Muzdalifah is a place, is Jam', they call it Jam'. And this is where after Maghrib you go there to Muzdalifah, ideally to wait and pray Maghrib and Isha in Muzdalifah. Once you reach, you make wudu, whatever, you make adhan, one adhan, each group, they make their salah. Everybody is gathered, you find each group, of course, they have a huge piece of land where you find thousands of people are there. of course, they don't pray one jama'ah together. Whatever group of people, they make their own jama'at. So they make one adhan and two iqama. Iqama for Salatul Maghrib and iqama for Salatul Isha. Maghrib 3 rak'ah, Isha 2 rak'ah. And this is where the Prophet ﷺ in Muzdalifah, there's a differences of opinions whether the Prophet ﷺ prayed even witr or not. Because he slept ﷺ. But the correct opinion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, pray witr. And that's it. No qiyamul layl. The Prophet ﷺ didn't even pray qiyamul layl on that night. He slept ﷺ, and if you're able to sleep, enjoy the sleep in Muzdalifah. So he slept ﷺ till Fajr. The women, the elders, whoever has a condition to leave in the middle of the night, that's fine. Or if the group is leaving, as long as it's after the middle of the night, people can leave from Muzdalifah, they fulfill the obligation by spending more of half of the night. If people can stay till Fajr, mashallah, this is what is perfect. He prayed Fajr ﷺ in Muzdalifah, and he stood up and he made dua and dhikr till right before sunrise. In the ninth of the day before, in the ninth of the Hijjah in Mina, he went to Arafah, start leaving after sunrise, right? In Muzdalifah, the Prophet ﷺ, he started moving before sunrise, going to the Jamrah. He stood and he made dua, and this is where the time is, the dua is accepted after Fajr in the 10th. Now the 10th, this is the day of Eid. This is Yawmul Nahr, the day of slaughtering. So he prayed Fajr ﷺ, and of course with Sunnat al-Fajr, and then after that made the adhkar and the dua, and then he left going ideally again to Jamrat al-Aqaba. You know, here now, not a tricky part or anything, but the 10th of the Hijjah, there are a'mal, very important actions to be done on the 10th of the Hijjah. You have Jamrat al-Aqaba, which is that last one. There is Jamrat al-Aqaba with 7 pebbles. You have shaving the head or shortening the hair. You have tawaf of al-Hajj or tawaf al-Ifada, and the sa'i if a person tamattu', making tamattu', tawaf and sa'i. If a person making ifrad or qiran, if they did the sa'i in the beginning, they don't have to make sa'i then. If they didn't, then they make sa'i. So you have tawaf and sa'i. And the slaughtering is not part of the actions that has to be done on the 10th. So again, you have 4 actions. You have the throwing the jamrah of al-Aqaba. You have the shaving or shortening the hair, and you have the tawaf and sa'i, and you have the hadi. If the first 3, if you do 2 of them, you can relieve yourself from al-ihram, except women. So everything, this is how it goes. There are 3 actions in the 10th of the Hijjah that counts. Again, it's the Jamrat al-Aqaba, shaving or shortening the hair, and the tawaf. The Prophet ﷺ did it in that order. He threw the Jamrah. Then he ﷺ slaughtered, he shaved, and then he went to make tawaf. But the 3 excluding the slaughtering, to throw the Jamrah, then to shave or to shorten, and then to make tawaf. And every time the Prophet ﷺ was asked on that day, people said, I shaved before I threw the Jamrah. He said, If'al wala haraj. The Prophet ﷺ himself, he said, do and there is no harm on you. Someone said, I made tawaf before I shaved. If'al wala haraj. Do and there is no harm. So there's no significance, there's no importance of the order of things. Do whatever is easy. Yes, if you can do it in that order, this is perfect. If not, there's no harm. Especially when people leave in the middle of the night, some of them, they go straight to the haram. They made it easy for them to make tawaf first before the crowd comes. So they make tawaf with their clothing of al-ihram. Then they shave their heads. If you do 2 out of 3, everything becomes permissible except women, except the relations. So if they do the 3, everything becomes permissible. So for example, if people go throw the Jamrah first, and then they shave. Then they change their clothes and they take their shower and everything, and then they go to make their tawaf with their normal clothing. If they make the tawaf first, and then they shave, then they can take their shower and clothes and so on, and then they go through the Jamrah. So 2 has to be done for the person to relieve himself from all of the mahdurat or what's forbidden for ihram. 2, everything becomes permissive except relations between husband and wife. And if it's the 3, everything becomes permissible. Right? So here this is for the 10th. Clear with these actions on the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. And if something is missed, some people, they don't make the tawaf on the 10th. That's fine. It can be done later. If they do 2 things, which is, again, will be the jamrah and shaving. They can change their clothes and they stay in Mina. They didn't do the tawaf, that's fine. But then wearing the normal clothing and they got to do it the next day or the day after, that's fine. So whatever is easy, as long as they do 2 actions, then they can take their ihram and they wear normal clothing. And then after that, ideally, again, the Prophet ﷺ, this is to show how things were at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, before sunrise from Muzdalifah, he went to Mina. I guess the connection is getting... after Muzdalifah, he went to Mina and he threw the jamrah, and he went and he slaughtered 60 of the animals, and he went and he shaved, and starting with the right side and then the left, and he went and he made tawaf and sa'i, and he returned to Mecca, to Mina, and prayed dhuhr there. All of that, was between sunrise and dhuhr, and he made it for Mina to make dhuhr. Of course, if nowadays, if you do that, if you make it for Isha, and if you do it in that order, this is an amazing thing to be done. But anyway, so then why? Because you need to spend the night in Mina. So if you get to make, if a person is busy making tawaf and it was late, and he ended up coming to Mina after the middle of the night, and he was not doing anything but being busy with the acts of ibadah, there's no dam on that person. Why? Because he was making tawaf. And people, of course, when some of the logistics, they have a place to stay, so you can use that place while after you through Jamrat al-Aqaba, you shaved your head, you go to the apartment or to the hotel, you change your clothes and you take a shower and things like this, and then you go to the Haram and you make your tawaf, and then you need to go to Mina. And some people, they go to the hotels. No, you have to spend the nights in Mina, right? And that's why then after the 10th, it's the 11th. You spend the night in Mina, or most of the night in Mina. And then you have the 11th of Dhul Hijjah. You have to throw the 3 jamarat from Dhuhr time. There's nothing to be done. If a person done all of that, or if a person did make the tawaf, they go make the tawaf and come back. But there's nothing but the 3 jamarat. On the 11th, they do that from Dhuhr anytime afterwards. And you do the same thing as with the jamarat as we mentioned. And then the 12th, you do the same thing, the jamarat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ تَعَجَّلَ وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ فِي أَيَّامٍ مَعْدُودَاتٍ فَمَنْ تَعَجَّلَ فِي يَوْمَيْنِ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ وَمَنْ تَأَخَّرَ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ لِمَنِ اتَّقَى. If people, they leave after the 2nd day of Ayyam al-Tashriq, the 12th, there's no harm on them. If they stay for the 3rd, mashallah, there's no harm, and it's better for them. So if the 12th, they throw the jamrah and they leave to go to Mecca, this is good. If they stay for another day, they have to throw the jamarat again on the 13th. The same thing, the sughra, then the middle, then the major one. And then they go to Mecca. And what's left for them to stay in Mecca is to make tawaf al-wada'. If someone did make the tawaf of al-hajj, then they make it then. Some people, they do this because it's difficult for them. So after they do Muzdalifah and they go to Mina and they don't go make for the tawaf, they stay in Mina till Ayyam al-Tashriq is over, and they go to Mecca. And when they go to Mecca, they make the tawaf of al-hajj. That's fine, because he did two things in the 10th, which is the jamrah and the shaving. So your clothing, normally you would wear, you take the ihram off and things like this. Everything become permissive except women till you make the tawaf of al-hajj. And the same thing, if person leaving right afterwards, they can make tawaf al-hajj, tawaf al-ifada, and tawaf al-wada' as one tawaf, and then they leave from Mecca. And then what's left from the wajibat is tawaf al-wada', which is the last thing that a person would do before he leaves to Mecca. So when we go here, we have the sa'i and then the jamarat. And then we talked about the umrah periods and obligations. And then we talked about the 8th and the 9th and the 10th and the 11th and the 12th and the 13th. And then you'll be in state of istiqamah till death. And this is one of the signs of the acceptance of Hajj, is that the person, his actions after Hajj is different than he was before Hajj. That's why the issue of al-istiqamah, to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah. Someone, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped them to go for Hajj, chose them, to be the delegation of the Muslim to go to the house of Allah and to do the acts of Hajj, then they return differently. And this is the sign of acceptance in which they repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before and after, inshallah ta'ala. There are many things that maybe we didn't mention, but hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, this can be something that we start with. And then, if you have any questions for whatever time is left, or anything that I missed, please ask, inshallah. And even when we should not see too much, it's very important that you get to see it. You know, there. تفضل. No. Is it permissible to wash the ihram clothing? Yes. And of course, before it's obvious. But once you put your ihram on, you can wash your ihram. You can change your ihram. There's no harm. You can take showers while you're in the state of al-ihram. What's forbidden is to put perfume on. It. But as far as changing it and things like this, there's no harm whatsoever. There's no evidence to prevent the Muslim from this. No.
Some soaps have scent.
Now, the soap, as we said, it's better to avoid the one with scents, but as the ulama, they say, there's no harm since it's not meant for that. People do not use soap to have a good smell. It's just they wash their hands, so there's no harm, but it's better to avoid it, but it's not an issue. Anything else?
Can we cut our hair and cut our nails once Dhul Hijjah starts?
Once?
Dhul Hijjah, the Hajj month.
Now, when it comes to cutting the hair and the nail from the beginning of the Hajj, there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that he made it very clear that إذا دخل ذي الحجة, if the Hajj enters and one of you intends to slaughter, but the slaughter of the udhiyah, the qurbani for Eid, then فلا يقربن لا يأخذن شيئا من شعره وأظافره. That means he should not take anything from his hair and his nails. That's from the beginning of the Hijjah or from where he starts his intentions that he's going to slaughter. And that should be done, yes. But for those who are making Hajj, if you're making Hajj, you have Hadi. And the Hadi is to be slaughtered on the 10th and the 11th, or starting from the 10th. And by the way, to some people, they don't relieve themselves from al-ihram till they make sure that their Hadi is slaughtered. You don't have to, as long as it's done within Ayam al-Tashriq. And it doesn't have anything with the relieving from the ihram. But for the Hajj person, his Hadi, that means the ruling does not apply on the person in Hajj when it comes to the beginning of the Hijjah, unless you are having udhiyah in your homeland while you're making Hajj, which is also recommended. So if you're going for Hajj and your family are here and you want to make qurbani also, udhiyah for you for Hajj is a good thing and it's recommended. Then from the beginning of the Hijjah, while you are in Mecca, don't cut your hair and nails for that reason, not for ihram.
But if you're going for Hajj, you can cut your hair and nails.
Yes. No.
Dhul Hijjah starts as well.
Yes, after the Hijjah starts, if a person doesn't have udhiyah, where in his home place, then he can cut his hair and nail.
If you're going for Tawaf Ziyarah on the 10th, like when you're done with Tawaf Ziyarah, can you do Tawaf Wada at the same time if you're not sure that you get a chance to come back for Tawaf Wada after the Tashriq?
Right. Can you make Tawaf al-Wada' after you make Tawaf al-Ziyarah of al-Hajj because you're not sure if you might come back and do it? The answer is no, because Tawaf al-Wada' is supposed to be the last thing that you do before you leave Mecca. So if you're making Tawaf al-Ziyarah and you're traveling the same day at night or the next day, then make it one Tawaf. You don't have to make two Tawaf. Only one Tawaf is sufficient. The meaning of Tawaf al-Wada' is that the last thing that you do in Mecca is the Tawaf before you leave. But the last thing, it doesn't have to be exactly the last thing because of how things are and things are crowded and so on. So if you're staying for a few days, then you can only do Tawaf al-Ziyarah, and then you give yourself enough time, plenty of time, to make Tawaf al-Wada' before you leave. So for even as the ulama, they say, if someone, say for example, the bus is going to take you to the airport at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can make Tawaf al-Wada' the Asr before. You don't have to wait till before Fajr and to make it tight for yourself. You know, you can assess the situation. You can do it before at ease, so that you don't, press yourself. And you can sleep afterwards, and then you wake up and you leave. This is fine. Why? Because it's the crowdedness makes things, the ضاق الأمر التسع, as they say. If the matter becomes tight, the ease comes. So don't make it difficult for yourself. You need to have time to take your shower, to change. And plus sometimes things changes, or they might have, they say this, but then all of a sudden they come early. So things like that to be in the safe side. But not to make it early when you're still going to stay for a couple of days or so. Yes.
If one can. So if one cannot go all the way to the Hajj al-Aswad, we have to get into the line like where it's at approximately, or it's where we see it?
No. After the tawaf, as we said, it's recommended to, of course, to pray 2 rak'ah anywhere, behind Maqam Ibrahim or anywhere, and then you drink Zamzam. And then ideally that you go to the Hajj al-Aswad. And if you can't, adjacent to the Hajj al-Aswad. If you can't, from whatever position you are, and you point your hand and you say Allahu Akbar, and that's it. And if it's not done, still the tawaf is valid.
So just the question, like you said, like you have to spend some part in Mina, right? Like let's suppose you are done like maybe like late in the like night, like 12, maybe like you went late after Isha.
Right.
For the tawaf ziyarah, like you finish maybe like 1, 2, 3. By the time you start, like maybe like how the travel logistics, like you probably get there by Fajr.
Right. When it comes to spending the night in Mina, as we said, from the wajib of al-Hajj, most of the night to be in Mina for the days, the 10th and the 11th and the 12th. But if a person, as ulama they say, you're going for tawaf ziyarah, so you're busy with the ibadah, and you end up missing being at night in Mina, then there's no harm, there's no dam, because you are doing the acts of ibadah. That's different than someone.
The intention is to come back.
Right. It's different than someone to go there and let me sleep for some time. And then he rests and then he misses. This is where he needs to do the dam now.
When going to Sa'i, we said we start the dua by in the Safa wal Marwa. So every time, we said we do, every after that, the whole
No, good question. When you in the Safa wal Marwa, you say the ayah only in the first time. In the Safa wal Marwa min sha'airillah, you say the ayah only when you're going to the Safa. And then in Marwa, you don't say the ayah, but you say the dua. You say the dhikr and the dua 3 times. You come back to the Safa, you say the dhikr and the dua, not in the Safa wal Marwa. Only in the first instant that you go to As-Safa.
we said the Prophet made dua standing right before
So, yes.
Is this to be done individually or?
Yes. The dua in general at all times is to be individually. So the dua of the Prophet ﷺ in Muzdalifah after Salatul Fajr, it was individually, and he make dua ﷺ, and then before sunrise he start moving. He start leaving before sunrise. And of course, again, practically, when you're told we're leaving, you leave. So if you have any means of making dua, then you should do that, inshallah. Not sure if there's any online questions. What the time here?
So as for the expiation, like, so what's the general ruling for the expiation? Like when it's like done that you have to do the qurbani versus
No.
like when it's just like you go away with like regular
Right.
kafara, like fitra, like
Right. As we said, there's 2 types of fidya. The fidya, if you do one of the prohibitions of ihram, that you covered your head or you did not wear your clothes of al-ihram and things like this, then the kafara is a choice of 3. Either you fast 3 days, or you feed 6 people of the poor in Mecca, or you do them as a choice. You can choose any of them. But if the kafara for not doing a wajib of Hajj from the 7 wajibat, like a person did not spend the night in Mina or did not throw the jamarat, then in that case it has to be done. There's no choice. And for a side is something else. If a person captured an animal, hunting wild animals and things like this, then it has to be measured. How much is its price? Someone has to give it a value, and then after that you see how much it's worth, and then you divide it of how half of a grain of food. That's how many people, poor people, that you would feed. So,
regards to the pillar of
Now, when it comes to some of the sunnah of al-ihram, which is, I did mention this, is that the Prophet ﷺ, when he made ihram from Wadi al-Aqiq, right outside of Medina, it happened that it was a fard salah. It was said to be asr salah, or so that the Prophet ﷺ prayed the fard and he made the ihram. So there's no such a thing as sunnah of al-ihram or 2 rak'ah of ihram. But if a person, he makes his ihram, that means he took a shower, he made wudu, things like this, then it's always recommended to pray 2 rak'ah. But it's not something that is associated with ihram. And if a person stopped or they didn't stop, but if they stop and they prayed, they find themselves by the masjid, pray 2 rak'ah. If it's time for fard salah, then you pray the fard salah. So there's no such a thing as 2 rak'ah for ihram.
One more logistical question. If you're in Medina and you, let's say, you pray Salat al-Dhuhr in Medina, and then right after that you depart to get to the miqat. It's not Asr time yet, but you get to the miqat, you make your niyyah. Are you able to pray Asr there, or before time?
Now, if you prayed Dhuhr in Medina and you left to go to Mecca, that's the question, and you stopped by the miqat and it's not time for Asr yet, can you pray Asr there before you leave? No, if you did not combine it. You can combine Asr and Dhuhr in Medina before you leave, because this is a valid combining the Salah because of traveling. So you know that you're going to leave after Dhuhr, then you combine Dhuhr and Asr, that's fine, and then you leave. But if you did not combine and you go to the masjid and it's before Asr, then you have to wait till Asr time to pray Asr Salah. You can combine? Yes, you combine and shorten because you're a traveler. Yes. In Medina, yes. No. Of course, there are many things when it comes to the logistics, and sometimes things are is difficult or not difficult. Inshallah, everything is easy. That's why with regards to the time, buses are late, they tell you to leave early. All of that is easy, inshallah ta'ala, and not to make it difficult for oneself, and to be with the group. Unless they would, they would cancel something, which is usually doesn't happen. And it's important also, and this is on the side too, that you ask. And that's how even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba would ask the Prophet ﷺ, what do I did this, I did this before this. So you have to ask. Plus even if you study very well, once you get there, sometimes the circumstances make you do things differently. So you have to make sure that you ask. And of course, to ask, I don't want to do it like this in public, but I can give you my number, inshallah. And anytime during the day or the night, if you're in Hajj and you have a question, don't hesitate, because this is a serious matter. You have to ask sometimes right on the spot, what do I do in this situation? And there's no such a thing as a silly question. So I'll give you my number, inshallah. WhatsApp, you can send a message, inshallah. Anything else?
So the adhkar that you mentioned that we need to be making during Sa'i, is that mandatory, or we can go around zikr?
Right, the adhkar to be said during Sa'i in the Safa and in the Marwa, it's not mandatory, it's recommended, and it's not too long of a dhikr, but the dua is definitely something recommended. If a person doesn't make dua whatsoever, his Sa'i is valid. But he missed, of course, this is, and that's another thing, is there's the dua where it's very likely to be accepted in Hajj, as we said in Arafah, in the Jamarat, in the Sa'i, and in the Tawaf. All of these are very recommended times to make dua.
When putting on the ihram, you take a ghusl, and then perfume, it's okay to perfume the body, right? Prior to putting on the ihram.
It's from the sunnah to perfume the body before you put the ihram, but on the parts of the body that won't be touched by the ihram, so that the perfume does not come into the ihram clothing. So the Prophet ﷺ, even they said, كَأَنِّي أَرَى وَبِيص, that they would see the reflection of the oil of the Prophet ﷺ, of the tib, of the perfume that he put in his head parting, ﷺ, because of how much he would put, ﷺ. And if it melts on the face, no problem. Under the arm, that's fine. On the face, on the head, but not on the clothing of al-ihram. And if it melts or goes, that's fine. I mean, it's not someone's actions.
During Sa'i, is there a right
Right. The shoulder is only to be exposed in the first, in the 7 rounds of the tawaf, whether it's the Qudum tawaf or Umrah tawaf, and that's it. And then to be covered right after the tawaf. The reason why I say there is, say for example, on the 10th of the Hijjah, you went from Muzdalifah straight to the Haram. And it happened that you have your clothes of Al-Ihram in. You don't show your right shoulder because you're not making a tawaf with Ihram. You see, it's only when it's the first tawaf that you come to Mecca to do, or the tawaf of Al-Umrah.
So if I come called while you're doing the tawaf, like you have to cover your shoulder?
Yes, if the iqama is made while you are in tawaf, you cover your shoulder, yes. No. No, تفضل.
I have to travel from here to Dubai.
Hmm.
For Hajj.
Right.
Dubai will be the miqat for me.
Right.
Make niyyah over there or somewhere else.
Good. If someone is, again, the miqat of the people of Dubai depends on how the plane comes, then it's going to be the miqat of the people of, which is Qarn al-Manazil, I believe, where they would say in the plane. But logistically, that in the airport, because it's very tight in the plane, that you put your clothing of al-ihram before you get into the plane, and you clean yourself, everything is ready, and then you go to the plane, and you don't make your niyyah of al-ihram till they say there is 5 minutes or something like this. Take a few minutes to be on the safe side. Then you say labbaik Allahumma. If you go in for tamattu, labbaik Allahumma umrah, then you start making the talbiyah. Then you are in the state of al-ihram.
We have to change the ihram over there and then there when we are close to the miqat.
You don't have to change the ihram.
No, we have to change clothes. We have to take ihram at Dubai
Oh yes, yes,
and wait for the miqat.
yes. Right. So because you need to have your ihram clothing in the plane at least. So that's why you do it in the airport. What if someone forgets it? Then you have to purchase it in the airport. And if someone, say, forgot it, some brother a few weeks back, he called me and he was in Chicago here in the airport, and he forgot his ihram. They took his ihram and it's in a plane. And he asked if there's any ihram, and he purchased it from me anyway. But he still has to go to another airport, so it's easy. But if someone forgets it, he still has to make the niyyah, and then he has to do the expiation. Let's see the al-miqat. See if there is a picture of him. Oh. Pictures of the mawaqit.
While you're doing the sa'i itself,
Mm-hmm.
is there anything you recommend to say there, or it's also open just like
Yes, when you're making sa'i, there is no specific dua to be said. Between the sa'i, between the Safa and Marwa, there is no authentic dua to be said. Even some said, Allahumma ghafir warham anta al-azzu al-akram. That's the only hadith, but there's no, this is the only one. But there's no such a thing. Any dua, any recitation of the Quran, anything whatsoever, it's all valid.
So wudu is not like mandatory for sa'i, right?
Wudu is not mandatory for sa'i. Tahara is not mandatory for sa'i. But tahara for tawaf is mandatory, of course. So for sa'i between the Safa and Marwa, you don't have to be in state of wudu. So if someone broke his wudu while doing the sa'i between the Safa and Marwa, he can continue, there's no harm. We'll stop here inshallah ta'ala because of the salah. So if you have any questions afterwards, then I'll give you the number inshallah. Should I give it now? Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullah khairan for coming. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Just one hadith inshallah ta'ala from the book of الترغيب والترهيب by Imam al-Mundhiri rahimahullah, and we're still in the chapter in ترغيب في المشي إلى المساجد سيما في الظلم وما جاء في فضلها, the encouragement, the rewards in walking to the masajid, especially during when it's dark, Fajr and Isha, and what came in the virtue and the superiority of it. One of these hadith reported by Imam al-Tirmidhi and others, and it's a sound hadith عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أتاني الليلة ربي فذكر الحديث إلى أن قال لي يا محمد أتدري فيما يختصم الملأ الأعلى؟ قلت نعم، في الدرجات والكفارات ونقل الأقدام إلى الجماعة وإسباغ الوضوء في السبرات وانتظار الصلاة بعد الصلاة، ومن حافظ عليهن عاش بخير ومات بخير وكان من ذنوبه كيوم ولدته أمه. الحديث. This is part of a hadith where it's famous of اختصام الملأ الأعلى. The angels, they not a dispute, but they argue with one another which is of the best of the rewards. So to make it short, the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked about this, he says, yes, in what? في الدرجات والكفارات. What are the best of the rewards of actions in the levels of virtue and the expiations of sins. ونقل الأقدام إلى الجماعة. This is the shahid, this is the point of reference, and people moving their foot, walking to the jama'ah. ونقل الأقدام, walking to the jama'ah. This is an act of ubudiyya to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we should not belittle this matter, walking, going to the masjid. Again, when people drive to the masjid, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful, but the point is to come to the masjid. And when a person comes to the masjid, this is an act of ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as mentioned before, every step is a good deed, and another step is expiation of sins and elevating one's level. وَإِسْبَاغِ الْوُضُوءِ فِي السَّبَرَاتِ. And making perfect wudu. As-sabarat is basically the cold weather, to make sure that a person would still fulfill the condition of the salah, of the wudu. وَانْتِظَارِ الصَّلَاةِ بَعْدَ الصَّلَاةِ. And waiting for a salah after salah. Waiting for the salah. That's also one of the things to be done if a person prays Salatul Maghrib and he stays in the masjid waiting for Salatul Isha. This is another good deed after a good deed. And then the part of the hadith, وَمَنْ حَافَظَ عَلَيْهِنْ. Whoever guard these actions and constantly doing these actions of coming to the masajid and fulfilling the jama'ah, عَاشَ بِخَيْرٍ. He would live with goodness, وَمَاتَ بِخَيْرٍ. And he would die also with matters of goodness. And this is the istiqamah, this is the steadfastness. أَنَّ مَنْ عَاشَ عَلَى شَيْءٍ مَاتَ عَلَيْهِ. Whoever lives upon something, he will die upon the same thing by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ مَاتَ عَلَى شَيْءٍ بُعِثَ عَلَيْهِ. And whoever dies upon something, he will be, inshallah ta'ala, resurrected upon the same thing. وَكَانَ مِنْ ذُنُوبِهِ كَيَوْمِ وَلَدَتْ أُمُّ. That means he will be, with regards to his sins, as if it's the day that his mother gave birth to him. Meaning expiations of sins, as it's mentioned in so many ahadith, when it comes to the salawat al-khams, the 5 daily salah, and the expiation of the sins as a result of that. And one last thing is, again, to revive always al-ihtisab, to revive, and this is part of the dhikr of Allah. When a person is reviving in his heart that he's seeking rewards by this action, you keep on seeking rewards from Allah. These are one of the means of gaining rewards and being steadfast upon the deen of Allah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم.